Chapter 399. A chilling light flashed across the son of fire's eyes. He stared at Yin Yang and arrogantly said, "I don't want to cause any trouble today. Yin Yang, bring everyone and leave and I'll let you go. Otherwise, you and your men will all die here." Yin Yang's brows twitched. His fighting intent surged as he said, "Son of Fire, although my strength isn't as good as yours, none of my Skyfire sect's disciples are afraid of trouble. If nothing happens, then so be it. But if the Yao Xin sect wants to fight, my Skyfire sect's disciples will accompany you at any time." I want to see how capable the people of the Skyfire sect are." The son of fire coldly snorted. A majestic aura surged towards Yin Yang. Yin Yang also furiously snorted. His body rapidly changed, turning into a huge golden horn dragon beast. His whole body was covered with golden scales, emitting an awe-inspiring aura. "You dare to summon a demon spirit in front of me?" A trace of anger flashed across the son of fire's eyes. The strength of the human clan is too inferior to the demon clan. Therefore, the human clan thought of a despicable method. That is to hunt the demon clan and seal the demon spirit into their body, obtaining a powerful strength. Ever since the birth of the human clan's demon spiritualists, the demon clan and the human clan have had an irreconcilable hatred. The war between the two clans became more and more intense, wishing that the other party could be completely annihilated. A blazing flame ignited on the body of the son of fire. The entire space was illuminated by the flame, turning into a dazzling red. Between his eyebrows slightly trembled. An invisible force suddenly spread out. Two figures suddenly moved. The two holy sons of the two divine sects attacked at the same time. Boom! 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 Flames soared into the sky, scattering in all directions. The space seemed like it was about to be torn apart. Indeed worthy of being the holy sons of the Skyfire sect and the Yao Xin sect. Their attacks are as fast as lightning and as powerful as thunder. Wuyazi sighed inwardly. Compared to these two saints, his strength was far inferior. The experts of the two divine sects also started fighting. However, they didn't dare to approach the place where the two chosen were fighting because they could be killed by the aftermath of the battle at any time. For a time, the battle became even more intense. Nya Li frowned for a moment. He had met Yin Yang once, but Yin Yang wanted to win against the Son of Fire. It was too difficult, but it wasn't easy for the Son of Fire to kill Yin Yang. Although both sides are restrained, the battle is too intense. It is very difficult for Nya Li to open inscription pattern array. "Nya Li, what should we do next?" Xiao Yu and Wuyazi couldn't help asking Nya Li, "What else can we do?" "Wait," Nya Li said in a deep voice. He closed his eyes and rested. He condensed his cultivation and charged towards the heavenly star realm. Looking at Nya Li's expression, Wuyazi smiled bitterly. Nya Li and Xiao Yu could cultivate in such an environment, but he couldn't. He still had to be Nya Li's bodyguard. While Yin Yang and the Son of Fire were fighting intensely, another group of people flew in. The one leading them was none other than Venerable God Thunder of the Pentastrike Demon Sect. Venerable God Thunder of the Pentastrike Demon Sect. "Oh, I didn't expect the holy sons of the Skyfire sect and the Yao Xin sect to be here. How lively!" Venerable God Thunder said in an old-fashioned tone. In terms of seniority, he was a level higher than Yin Yang and the Son of Fire. Yin Yang and the Son of Fire were in the middle of a fierce battle. Neither side gave up. Venerable God Thunder, the Yao Xin sect and the Pentastrike Demon sect are both under the banner of the ancestral demonic Saint Land. If you help me kill these people from the Skyfire sect, I'll give you all the Ganges crystals here. How about it? Son of Fire shouted at Venerable God Thunder. Venerable God Thunder sneered and said, "Son of Fire wants to make a deal with me? I thought that the Holy Son, Li Huo, was a lone wolf and never asked for help." Yin Yang was a little anxious after Venerable God Thunder appeared. The Holy Sun, Lihu's palm landed on Yin Yang's chest, revealing an opening in his attack. Yin Yang was pushed back. His blood surged. Son of Fire was too strong. Yin Yang was already struggling to deal with him, not to mention that venerable God Thunder was on his side. I don't want to get involved in the matters between the Yaoshin sect and the Skyfire sect. I'm here for the treasures of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. I already have 60,000 Ganges crystals. If I take some more, I'll be in the top 6 and get a share of the treasures. Whatever you two want to do, that's your business. Venerable God Thunder didn't seem to care. Son of Fire coldly snorted. He knew Venerable God Thunder's character. Venerable God Thunder was famous for being despicable. Now that he said he wasn't going to get involved, he was probably waiting for him and Yin Yang to mutually injure each other before reaping the benefits. He glanced at Yin Yang. Even though he'd injured Yin Yang, he didn't take another step forward. Son of Fire solemnly said, "It's still too early for you to fight me with your strength. I'll let you off this time." Yin Yang looked at Son of Fire, then at Venerable God Thunder. He understood that he'd be courting death if he stood out at this moment. He led the Skyfire sect's experts to the side and calmly observed the situation. Venerable God Thunder furrowed his brows. He didn't expect Son of Fire to stop fighting. No wonder people said that Son of Fire wasn't easy to deal with. It looked like they weren't lying. Venerable God Thunder smiled. "I'm afraid that only the 3 of us are qualified to split the treasures in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Why don't the 3 of us join forces and take all the Ganges crystals?" The corner of Yin Yang's mouth twitched. It was impossible for him to join forces with the Yaoshin sect and the Pentastrike Demon sect. Son of Fire indifferently said, "If you're interested in the Ganges crystals, then go ahead and fight for them. I'm not interested in the Ganges crystals anymore." He stepped on the air and slowly descended. Venerable God Thunder furrowed his brows. What was Son of Fire planning this time? Niali opened his eyes and looked at Son of Fire's actions. Could it be that Son of Fire had already seen through the mysteries of the inscription pattern array? As if sensing something, the Holy Sun, Lihu glanced in Nya Li's direction. Those demonic green eyes of his seemed capable of stirring one's soul. Nya Li quickly retracted his gaze. He appeared very calm. It was best if Son of Fire didn't see through the demon blood sacrifice. Otherwise, he'd be in danger. Son of Fire only glanced at Nya Li before retracting his gaze. He raised his head to look at the statues, as if he was deducing something. Venerable God Thunder was originally prepared to fight for the Ganges crystals. But now, Son of Fire seemed to have given up. Yin Yang also didn't seem to have any intentions of fighting. Venerable God Thunder suddenly felt a little dull. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Yin Yang stared at Son of Fire's back with a profound gaze. He vaguely understood something. If Venerable God Thunder wanted the Ganges crystals, then he'd just have to fight for them. The entire hall was in a delicate balance. For the time being, no one made a move. Chapter 400. Nya Li narrowed his eyes. The Son of Fire seemed to have discovered something. As for Yin Yang, he seemed to have sensed something as well. Sure enough, those who could become holy sons of the major sects weren't simple characters. The Son of Fire furrowed his brows as he tried to calculate the inscription patterns on the statues. However, it was clear that the Son of Fire's progress wasn't as fast as Nya Li's. He'd been standing in front of a statue for a long time without moving. Indeed, it would be difficult for the Son of Fire to reach Nya Li's level when it came to understanding inscription pattern arrays. In his previous life, Nya Li had studied in the Temporal Demon Spirit Book for a long time. Furthermore, the Temporal Demon Spirit Book contained all sorts of inscription pattern arrays. It wasn't something that an ordinary person could compare to. If the Son of Fire wanted to break this inscription pattern array, he'd probably need at least half a month to do so. Venerable God Thunder waited for a while before he grew impatient. He flew away and continued to fight for the Ganges crystals. He didn't understand why the Son of Fire and Yin-Yang would stop fighting for the Ganges crystals. Regardless of whether the Ganges crystals were useful or not, he had to get his hands on them first. A follower next to him looked at Yin-Yang and asked, "Holy Son, what should we do next? Are we going to keep waiting?" Yin-Yang looked at the Son of Fire, who was standing in front of a statue. After a moment of silence, he said, "Let's find another place. Let's not fight for the Ganges crystals for the time being." Venerable God Thunder was frantically fighting for the Ganges crystals and massacring everyone. If they joined the fight for the Ganges crystals, they'd inevitably have to fight Venerable God Thunder. Casualties would be unavoidable. However, there was no point in continuing to wait here. Let's see if there are any other treasures in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Suddenly, a deep voice rang out from within the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. "Since you've come to my Void Illusionary Divine Palace, then you'll have to abide by our rules. If anyone dares to break them, then don't blame me for being impolite. Anyone who trespasses into the rear hall must leave immediately. That's a dead end." The Void Illusionary Divine Palace violently shook, as if doomsday had arrived. Li didn't know what the intent of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace was trying to do, but he could sense that it was afraid of someone breaking the inscription pattern array. Every time someone started to study this inscription pattern array, he would try his best to stop them. Although he didn't know what the Void Illusionary Divine Palace was planning, Li could feel an invisible pressure enveloping him. The Void Illusionary Divine Palaces might have activated a powerful array. This terrifying killing intent was too powerful. If it continued to operate, everyone in the rear hall would be killed. At that moment, the Son of Fire, Yin-Yang, and Venerable God Thunder all stopped moving. The will of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace wasn't willing to let them stay in the rear hall. There was a high chance that something was hidden there. Given their personalities, they were even more unwilling to leave. "Holy Son, what should we do?" Everyone from the Skyblaze sect looked at Yin-Yang. Yin-Yang said in a solemn voice, "Everyone listen to my orders. Prepare to retreat at any time, but we still have to wait." His gaze shifted to the Son of Fire. The Son of Fire had a deep look in his eyes. His intuition told him that the secret must be in those sculptures. However, he couldn't decipher it in a short period of time. If he continued to stay in the rear hall, based on the terrifying killing intent, he'd likely die. However, he wasn't willing to leave just like that. If the Void Illusionary Divine Palace really did hide a treasure, then even if reinforcements arrived and obtained it, he might not be able to get his hands on it. Li's gaze quickly swept across the Son of Fire, Yin-Yang, and Venerable God Thunder. The three of them had managed to form a balance. Li's eyes flickered. Perhaps he should take the risk. Li transmitted his voice to Uyazi. With the Son of Fire's abilities, can he see through the demon blood sacrifice on me? Uyazi glanced at Li. Normally, he wouldn't be able to see through it. If the demon blood sacrifice could be so easily seen through, then it wouldn't be the demon blood sacrifice, unless the Son of Fire has a special divine artifact on him. He didn't know what Li was planning. Since that's the case, then let's take the risk. Li walked forward. Just as the Son of Fire, Yin-Yang, and Venerable God Thunder were vexed over when to retreat, Li suddenly said, "I can break this inscription pattern array." Upon hearing Li's voice, all the experts in the rear hall turned to look at Li. A heavenly fate realm claims that he can break this inscription pattern array? Most of the people had a hint of doubt in their eyes. After all, even the Son of Fire couldn't figure out how to break this inscription pattern array, even after pondering it for so long. Yin-Yang and Venerable God Thunder's gazes fell on Li with a hint of scrutiny. As he looked at the youth from the demon clan, Yin-Yang inexplicably recalled the dazzling youth from the Three Divine Sects exchange. Sometimes a person's knowledge had little to do with their age and cultivation. The Son of Fire's gaze fell on Nieli. He was silent for a moment. "You do it," the Son of Fire said in a deep voice, then retreated to the side. Nieli looked at the Son of Fire, Yin-Yang, and Venerable God Thunder. "I'm sure that the will of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace doesn't want us to open this inscription pattern array. I don't know what methods they'll use to deal with us. I only have one request. Let go of our grudges for the time being." "I have no problem with that." Venerable God Thunder spread his hands. He was here for the treasure, not against anyone. Yin-Yang glanced at the Son of Fire. Although he was on guard, he understood that he couldn't do anything to the Son of Fire for the time being. "I have no problem with that either," Yin-Yang said calmly. "I won't deal with them," the Son of Fire said indifferently. Although Nieli knew that the three of them wouldn't cooperate immediately, he had a card up his sleeve. He didn't know if the three of them would fight, but at the very least, they had no reason to deal with Nieli. On one hand, Nieli wasn't a threat. On the other hand, Nieli was likely the only one who could break through the Void Illusionary Divine Palace's layers of mechanisms. Nieli quickly deduced the inscription patterns on the 8 statues. Before the Son of Fire's group arrived, Nieli had already deduced the inscription patterns on 8 statues. While they were fighting, Nieli had deduced the inscription patterns on 5 more statues. Fortunately, he'd already deduced the most crucial part of the inscription pattern array. All he had to do now was open the inscription pattern array. However, under the watchful eyes of the Son of Fire and Venerable God Thunder, opening the inscription pattern array was undoubtedly asking a tiger for its skin. Nieli transmitted his voice to Xiaoyu and said, "If there's a chance, find a time to leave. This time I might die, but don't worry about it. In any case, I can revive in the Soul Hall. Just don't throw your life away." Due to the birth of the baby, there were indeed a lot of things to do. Let's slow down the updates for now. The Chronicles of the Demon God manga would be very stable. Snail would also update the Chronicles of the Demon God novel until the end. As for the students who were worried about the development of the manga, they could rest assured. The later stages of the Chronicles of the Demon God manga would definitely be very exciting. Once Snail's matters were settled, the updates would resume. Chapter 401. Even if we die together, Xiaoyu said resolutely. Nieli's gaze fell on Xiaoyu. Although she was dressed in men's clothes, her features were extremely moving. Xiaoyu's face flushed red as she stamped her feet. "Why are you looking at me?" "Haha, nothing." Nieli laughed. Under everyone's gazes, Nieli walked towards one of the statues. Wuyazi looked at Nieli, then back at Xiaoyu. He was a little puzzled. Why did he feel that there was something wrong with the relationship between Nieli and Xiaoyu? What were those two men up to? Just as Nieli walked towards the statue, an angry snort sounded out. "These 36 statues are a secret array of my Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Anyone who dares to touch them will be killed without mercy." The intent of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace coldly snorted. An invisible force swept towards Nieli. The Son of Fire's brows twitched. With a wave of his hand, a scarlet shield of fire appeared out of thin air a few dozen meters away from Nieli. Boom! The invisible force bombarded the shield of fire, causing sparks to fly in every direction. The attack didn't affect Nieli at all. Nieli started breaking the inscription pattern array. Nieli understood that the Son of Fire would definitely protect him at all costs before he broke the inscription pattern array. Although the intent of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace claimed to be in control of the entire palace, it couldn't do anything to these experts. Otherwise, it wouldn't have intentionally scattered Ganji's crystals to incite these experts to kill each other. Nieli continued to write inscription pattern after inscription pattern. As the inscription patterns entered the statue, the inscription patterns on the statue began to revolve. The Son of Fire was quietly watching from the side. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He couldn't understand many of the methods that Nya Li used to break the inscription pattern array. It can be seen that Nya Li's understanding of inscription patterns is much higher than his. The Son of Fire was startled. He didn't expect Nya Li to have such an ability at the Heavenly Fate realm. Nya Li was with Wiyazi. Were they Wiyazi's clansmen or Wiyazi's servants? If he could take Nya Li under his command, that would be pretty good. What Nya Li didn't know was that Son of Fire was already secretly plotting against him. He concentrated on deciphering the inscription pattern array. One after another, inscription patterns blasted into it. The will of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace seemed a little anxious as it launched several attacks at Nya Li. However, all of them were blocked by the Son of Fire and the other experts. Boom! The last inscription pattern blasted into the statue. The dozens of statues within the inscription pattern array rumbled as they moved, constantly changing positions. A deep entrance appeared in front of them in the middle. A flight of stairs led downwards, leading to an unknown destination. Everyone's eyes lit up at the sight of this. They'd already searched over 80% of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Although they'd found some treasures, they weren't anything special. However, this tunnel might very well be the location of the real treasures. Yin Yang and Venerable God Thunder also descended with their people. The three of them exchanged glances. Venerable God Thunder faintly smiled. A cunning light flashed in his eyes as he said, "I wonder if there are any hidden traps in this underground tunnel. Two holy sons, it's impossible for any of you to take all the treasures. Why don't we join forces and split the treasures evenly among the three of us?" Yin Yang went silent for a moment. Righteous and evil couldn't coexist. Working together with Venerable God Thunder and Son of Fire would simply tarnish his reputation. However, he wasn't someone who didn't know how to be flexible in this situation. So what if he agreed for the time being? Weapons would be drawn at any moment. "All right," Yin Yang said in a deep voice. Son of Fire spread out his hands. "All right," Nya Li slowly said. "Not 3, but 4. Hearing Nya Li's words, the subordinates of the 3 experts were dumbfounded as they looked at Nya Li. Nya Li was too daring. A Heavenly Fate realm cultivator was actually making demands of 3 experts who were close to the Tao of Dragon Realm. They wanted to split the treasures evenly. They really wondered if this brat, Nya Li, had lost his mind. Venerable God Thunder looked at Nya Li with great interest. His eyes flickered with a cold light. He had never met a Heavenly Fate realm that dared to speak to him in such a manner. The Holy Son, Li Hu, waved his hand and said, "If we obtain the treasures, we'll split them evenly with him. Without him, we wouldn't have been able to open this inscription pattern array." Son of Fire thought inwardly. As a Heavenly Fate realm expert, Nya Li wouldn't make such a request if he didn't have some ability. If Nya Li really did have the ability, then what was the point of splitting some of the treasures? Perhaps he could take the opportunity to recruit Nya Li. Nya Li was so proficient in inscription pattern arrays. With so many secret realms in the Draconic Ruins realm, wouldn't it be easy for him to obtain many treasures? Talents were much more important than treasures. Yin Yang said, "I agree." From Yin Yang's point of view, obtaining a third or a quarter of the treasures wasn't the most important. In any case, Nya Li didn't believe that the 3 of them would be willing to split the treasures in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace equally. He reckoned that the 3 of them would start fighting after discovering the treasures. The reason why Nya Li made such a request was to probe the 3's characters. Furthermore, he wanted them to attach more importance to his existence and increase his bargaining chips. If the Son of Fire and Venerable God Thunder had some insight, they would definitely know that he was an indispensable person for them to obtain the treasures. As for Yin Yang's side, Nya Li had other plans. Venerable God Thunder looked at the other 2 and asked, "Then, who's going to go first?" Son of Fire decisively said, "The 3 of us will send 10 people each. We'll go first and take a look." "All right," Venerable God Thunder and Yen Yang also nodded in agreement. 30 people quickly gathered and walked into the tunnel together. A moment later, miserable screams came from the tunnel. 3 people crawled out, their bodies covered in injuries. One of them cupped his hands and reported to the Son of Fire, reporting to the Holy Sun. There's a mechanism in the tunnel. We've only gone 500 meters, but we almost died. The Son of Fire said in a deep voice, "Send another 30 people to continue the search." Sure enough, the lives of the divine sex people weren't worth anything. Were they just using people to fill the trap? Although Nieli was absolutely confident that he could break the trap, he wasn't willing to say it out loud. He wanted to exhaust the strength of the Son of Fire and Venerable God Thunder's subordinates first. They sent wave after wave of people down. Finally, someone came back to report that they discovered an enormous underground palace with countless treasures hidden within. "Let's go." The Son of Fire coldly snorted. The group of people began to rush in. When they entered the tunnel, a force rolled up Nieli and brought him into the secret tunnel. Xiao Yu didn't hesitate for a moment. She also flew up and followed in. Wuyazi also flew up. Chapter 402. Yen Yang and Venerable God Thunder also led their troops into the secret passage. Naturally, they weren't willing to be left behind. They definitely wouldn't let the Son of Fire monopolize the treasures of the void illusionary divine palace. The secret passage was littered with corpses, and the stench of blood permeated the entire passage. "You're from the divine blooded raccoon clan?" The Son of Fire asked Nieli as he flew. "That's right." Nieli nodded. However, he wasn't willing to say more. If there was a flaw, and the Holy Sun Li Hu saw through his true identity, then it would be troublesome. "I never thought that the divine blooded raccoon clan would have such a talent. You're so proficient in the Tao of inscription patterns. How about you follow me and become my follower?" The Son of Fire said. There were many people in the Yao Xin sect who wanted to become his follower, but couldn't. He wondered what Nya Li would think of him favoring Nya Li so much. "Many thanks for the Holy Sun's kind intentions, but I'm used to wandering outside. I'm afraid I can't become the Holy Sun's follower." Nieli replied. It was impossible for him to become the Son of Fire's follower. If he followed the Son of Fire back to the Yao Xin sect, Nya Li's identity would be exposed. The Son of Fire furrowed his brows, looking a little unhappy. But after a brief moment, he returned to normal. "Since you're not willing, then forget it." The Son of Fire's tone returned to indifference. Nieli smiled. He'd already expected this outcome, but he didn't care. The Son of Fire would definitely need his help in the future. As long as Nieli had the ability to break inscription pattern arrays, the Son of Fire wouldn't rashly offend him. Who knew if the Son of Fire would need his help in the future? After passing through the long and narrow passage, a vast space appeared in their field of vision. This was a boundless space of nothingness. There were countless boulders floating in the space, densely packed together, sealing off all the nearby space. These boulders floated around, occasionally transforming into streams of light. This was the ethereal stone formation. Nya Li's heart was slightly moved. "Look over there!" someone shouted from the side. Everyone looked into the distance. Behind those floating boulders, there were all sorts of treasures floating about. They looked like jewel treasures. It was incomparably splendid. As long as they could pass through this stone array, they would be able to obtain countless treasures. The dazzling array of treasures dazzled everyone's eyes. Who knew how many ancient treasures there were inside? "What array is this?" The Son of Fire looked at Nieli and asked in a deep voice. "This formation looks familiar. It contains endless mysteries. If we want to break this array, I'm afraid it will take at least 2 to 3 months." Nya Li said thoughtfully. Hearing Nya Li's words, the Son of Fire was a little silent. He still didn't understand what kind of array this densely packed boulder was. If Nya Li directly said that it couldn't be broken, then forget it. At worst, he would just bring Nieli inside. However, Nieli said it would take at least 2 to 3 months. What should they do? Should they wait here or try to break the array? Yang and Venerable God Thunder both frowned. 2 to 3 months, that's not a short time. The Son of Fire was silent for a moment. He looked at Nieli and said, "You stay here and find a way to break the array first. We will send someone to try it." "Okay." Nieli nodded. The Son of Fire said in a deep voice, same as before, "We will each send 10 people." "Okay." Yang and Venerable God Thunder both nodded. The 30 Heavenly Axis Realm experts quickly gathered together and flew towards the stone array. Within the stone array, floating boulders danced around. When these experts entered the stone array, they seemed to have lost their direction. They randomly turned around and were stuck in the stone array, unable to get out. Some of the Heavenly Axis Realm experts swung their fists in a frenzy. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds rang out, but the boulders didn't move. "This bunch of trash!" Venerable God Thunder couldn't help cursing. Venerable God Thunder's words are wrong. It's not that they're incompetent, but this stone array has the effect of confusing the mind. It's just like the 1,000 illusions, soul, bewildering array. If you want to walk out of this stone array, you'll probably have to rely on luck. If there's a few hundred people, it'll be pretty good if there's even one person that can walk to the other side. Nieli explained. "Then what should we do? Don't tell me we're just going to wait here." Venerable God Thunder said a little impatiently. Wait here for 2 or 3 months. He didn't even know if it would work. Since this stone array can only trap people and not kill, then we can send more people. Who knows, maybe 1 or 2 people will be able to walk out of the stone array and reach the other side. Wiyazi suddenly said. Hearing Wiyazi's words, the surrounding people went silent. This seemed to be feasible. Son of Fire glanced at Wiyazi and then at Nieli. He pointed at Nieli and said he stays here. Wiyazi, the 2 of you enter the stone array first. Wiyazi smiled bitterly. His suggestion had dug a hole for him. He couldn't help but look at Nieli. Seeing that Nieli didn't respond, he could only helplessly nod and agree. All right, we'll enter the array first. Wiyazi leaped up and flew toward the stone array in the distance. Xiaoyu glanced at Nieli and heard Nieli say, Don't worry, this stone array is not dangerous. Xiaoyu nodded and also leaped up and flew toward the stone array. When Wiyazi and Xiaoyu also entered the stone array, Son of Fire seemed to be a little relieved. With a wave of his hand, all the experts under him leaped up and flew toward the stone array. Yang and Venerable God Thunder thought for a while. Then their subordinates also flew into the stone array. After those experts entered the stone array, they all wandered around inside and were trapped in the stone array. I don't know whose people will walk out of the stone array first. We can only leave it to fate. Nieli smiled and looked meaningfully at Son of Fire and the other 2. Son of Fire didn't speak, while Yang examined Nieli. As for Venerable God Thunder, he looked a little impatient. You want to wait here for 2 or 3 months. I don't have much patience. I don't believe that such a lousy array can trap me. Venerable God Thunder said with a little disbelief. If I waited here for 2 or 3 months, I would have already broken the array. You guys continue to wait here. I'll go first. Venerable God Thunder turned into a bolt of lightning and shot out into the stone array. Now, only Son of Fire and Yang were left. Son of Fire sat on the ground with his legs crossed and closed his eyes to cultivate. Yang also appeared to be extremely patient as he prepared to wait patiently. Seeing this scene, Nieli's mouth revealed an invisible smile. Now that there were only 2 people left, and one of them was Yang, it would be much easier. Chapter 403. The stone array in the distance was operating in a strange way, and everyone was trapped inside, unable to come out. Seeing the Son of Fire sitting cross-legged and cultivating, Nieli sat down with his back facing the Son of Fire. The corners of his mouth moved slightly, and his voice was condensed into a beam and transmitted to Yin Yang. Senior brother Yin Yang, I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Hearing this voice, Yin Yang frowned slightly. He was a little surprised, and then he came to a realization. He had been a little suspicious of Nie Li's identity before, and now he was even more certain. Nie Li should be disguised as a demon. He just didn't expect that Nie Li's disguise technique was so extraordinary that even he and the Son of Fire were kept in the dark. Yin Yang's mouth didn't move, but he condensed his voice into a thread and transmitted it to Nie Li's ears. You transmitted your voice to me because you want me to help you, right? Tell me, how do you want me to help you? I owe you a favor previously. Do you want me to return it to you now? Yin Yang transmitted his voice very simply and straightforwardly. Senior brother Yin Yang's eyes are like torches. Nie Li smiled faintly. With Yin Yang's wisdom, he naturally saw through Nie Li's thoughts at a glance. Can you really break the stone array in front? Yin Yang couldn't help but ask. If I want to break the stone array in front, I will need to have 20 experts above the martial ancestor realm. Although I can't break the array, I can pass through the stone array. If I get the treasures, I will go back and share half with senior brother Yin Yang. How about it? Nie Li said, I owe you a favor previously. Today, I will return the favor, so we don't owe each other anything. If I split the treasures with you, wouldn't I owe you another favor? Forget about splitting the treasures. Tell me, how do you want me to help you? Yin Yang said straightforwardly. He didn't expect that Nie Li could actually pass through the stone array. From deciphering the inscription pattern array to knowing how to pass through the stone array, Nie Li's vast knowledge indeed caused him to be extremely shocked. He couldn't help but be curious about Nie Li. Even if he started reading ancient books in his mother's womb, it was impossible for him to know so much. Help me stall the Son of Fire. I will find a chance to pass through the stone array. Nie Li transmitted his voice to Yin Yang. That's not a problem. Although I can't kill that demon Li Hua, I can't kill him. But it won't be a problem to stall him. Yin Yang lightly smiled. Although he couldn't obtain the treasures of the void illusionary divine palace, he'd still succeeded as long as the Son of Fire couldn't obtain them. Wait until the matter here is settled. We'll meet at the outer hall in the northeast. I'll have to trouble senior brother Yin Yang to escort me out of the void illusionary divine palace. Nie Li said, That's not a problem. Yin Yang straightforwardly replied. After receiving Yin Yang's confirmation, Nie Li stood up and walked towards the stone array. Sensing Nie Li's movements, the Son of Fire suddenly opened his eyes. He asked in a deep voice, Where are you going? I want to observe the stone array up close. Nie Li said with a faint smile as he took one step at a time. The Son of Fire's eyes flickered as strands of energy revolved around Nie Li. Nie Li's cultivation was only at the heavenly fate realm, so the Son of Fire wasn't worried about where Nie Li could run. As long as he was within 1,000 meters, the Son of Fire could control him at will. If Nie Li tried to run, the Son of Fire could immediately restrain Nie Li. Nie Li slowly approached the stone array until he was only a few hundred meters away. The Son of Fire suddenly stood up and said in a deep voice, You can't go any further. Come back. Waves of binding energy swept towards Nie Li. Just as the energy was about to wrap around Nie Li, the sound of explosions rang out. The Holy Sun, Li Hua's energy was blocked. Nie Li was like an arrow released from a bow as he shot forward. The Son of Fire furrowed his brows and looked at Yin Yang. Yin Yang had actually helped him. He couldn't understand why Yin Yang would help Nie Li. Could it be that Nie Li and Yin Yang had reached some sort of agreement? The Son of Fire wanted to chase after Nie Li. However, Yin Yang also flew across the sky, waving his palm to attack the Son of Fire. Bang! Bang! The Son of Fire and Yin Yang were engaged in a fierce battle in the void. Although Son of Fire was stronger than Yin Yang, it was unrealistic for him to avoid Yin Yang's pursuit in a short time. In just a moment, Nieli swooped down. He entered the stone formation. Seeing Nieli enter the stone matrix, the Son of Fire looked at Yin Yang with a gloomy face and asked, "Why did you help him?" "Do I need a reason?" Yin Yang laughed and said, "Our Fire God sect and your Yao Xin sect have always been sworn enemies. Of course, I have to oppose it." The Son of Fire frowned. He would be a fool if he believed Yin Yang's words. Yin Yang and Nieli had definitely reached some sort of deal. However, Nieli was a heavenly fate realm demon. What exactly did he promise Yin Yang for Yin Yang to be willing to help Nieli? Yin Yang wouldn't give him an answer to these questions. Nieli had already entered the stone matrix. Unless he also entered the stone matrix, he wouldn't be able to do anything to Nieli. However, he didn't know how to break the stone matrix. "Since I'm here, my mission is complete. Anyway, my men are trapped in the stone matrix and can't get out. I'll take my leave first. See you later." Yin Yang patted the dust off his body, turned around, and rushed towards the passage he came from. The Son of Fire looked at Yin Yang's back with a gloomy gaze. Yin Yang must have made an agreement with Nieli. If he kept an eye on Yin Yang, he might be able to catch Nieli. However, Yin Yang turned around and left. He might have played some trick. Maybe he wanted to lure him away so that Nieli could escape. The Son of Fire's eyes flickered as he stared at the stone matrix in front of him. He glanced at Yin Yang, who had turned around and left. Then he leaped up and flew towards the stone matrix. The Son of Fire was an extremely conceited person. He had also calculated the formation of the stone matrix in front of him. He didn't believe that Nieli could break the stone matrix. Well, he couldn't. Seeing the Son of Fire also fly into the stone matrix, Yin Yang was stunned for a moment. He originally wanted to lure the Son of Fire outside, but he didn't expect the Son of Fire to enter the stone matrix. After thinking about it, he understood. With the Son of Fire's conceit, it wasn't surprising that he would do such a thing. It actually saved him a lot of trouble. After thinking for a moment, Yin Yang smiled and flew back. He sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. Next, it was up to Nieli. Nieli shuttled back and forth in the stone matrix. Based on his understanding of the ethereal stone matrix, he leaped up and flew. The black and white wings behind him constantly flapped as he turned into a stream of light. Xiao Yu and Weazi were still trapped in the matrix. There were floating stones everywhere, blocking their line of sight. They didn't know where they were. It was as if they were in the 1,000 illusion bewildering array. "Damn it, we're trapped and can't get out." Weazi couldn't help but curse and said gloomily, it seemed that it was impossible to pass through the stone matrix. There was also no way to retreat. Were they going to be trapped here forever? At this moment, Xiao Yu let out a scream. Weazi turned his head and looked. Xiao Yu was nowhere to be seen. Xiao Yu was killed? Weazi's heart trembled and he quickly became alert. He couldn't help but feel a little depressed. Xiao Yu was killed and he couldn't find her corpse. This meant that the things in Xiao Yu's spatial ring had nothing to do with him. Chapter 404. Weazi looked around. Xiao Yu had disappeared, and not even her corpse could be found. He turned around, but he was still pacing back and forth in the same place, unable to find the way out. At this time, in the depths of the stone array, Xiao Yu had just been suddenly pulled away, and she was startled. She was about to shout, but someone directly covered her mouth and hugged her tightly. "Don't make a sound." Nieli transmitted his voice to Xiao Yu. Weazi was trapped in the array. If he heard Xiao Yu shout, he could easily find her. Hearing Nieli's voice, Xiao Yu's heart relaxed. But thinking of the ambiguous position between her and Nieli, Xiao Yu couldn't help but blush. Along the way, she had been taken advantage of by Nieli several times. Although it was a special situation where he had no other choice, Nieli didn't have the slightest awareness of keeping a distance. Seeing that Xiao Yu was no longer struggling, Nieli let go. "I was forced by the situation just now. If I didn't cover your mouth, you would have screamed. Let's go, follow me, and don't leave more than 2 meters behind me." You have to pay attention to where I step on the stone. Nya Li leaped up, constantly stepping on stone after stone. Xiao Yu followed behind Nya Li, looking at Nya Li's back. Her eyes flickered and finally sighed silently. About half an hour later, Nya Li passed through the stone array and arrived on the opposite side. There were all kinds of treasures floating in the void. There were gold spirit stone essences, as well as artifacts of various grades. In the distant void, a strange pearl was shining brightly. This mysterious pearl was constantly changing colors, emitting thousands of rays of light. Seeing this pearl, Nya Li's heart stirred. This pearl was clearly the legendary illusory spirit pearl. The illusory spirit orb was an extremely powerful battle treasure. Once the owner of the illusory spirit orb activated it, they could even trap those who were a few ranks above them in an illusory predicament, unable to break free. Although it couldn't kill, it was a treasure with a special function. In addition to confusing people, it also had some wonderful functions. It was definitely an ancient artifact. The corner of Nya Li's mouth curled up as he thought about the effects of this illusory spiritual pearl. This illusory spirit pearl's function was much larger than the green poison pearl. Nya Li glanced at Xiao Yu and said, "I'll go collect that treasure. You go collect all the gold spiritual stone essences and artifacts nearby." Xiao Yu nodded his head and hurriedly packed up the gold spiritual stone essences and artifacts. They were enough to keep her busy for a while. Nya Li rapidly approached the illusory spirit pearl. At this moment, the illusory spirit pearl suddenly emitted a dazzling radiance. Nya Li felt as if he had suddenly arrived in a fiery hell. Raging flames assaulted his face, wanting to roast him into a jerky. "Humph, you want to trap me with this bit of illusion." All of a sudden, Nya Li activated the heavenly energy within his soul realm and blasted it into the beer platform. After passing through 2 meridians, his eyes flashed with 2 peculiar rays of light. The raging flames around him rapidly faded as Nya Li reached out to grab the illusory spirit pearl. Without anyone controlling it, the illusory spirit pearl was naturally much weaker. Without anyone controlling it, its might was naturally much weaker. Just as it was about to be grabbed by Nya Li, the illusory spirit pearl turned into a streak of light and flew away. Trying to leave? Not so easy. Nya Li coldly snorted and quickly summoned the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting from his soul realm. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting flew out of his hand. Right now, the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was completely under Nya Li's control. The huge space enveloped the illusory spirit pearl. The illusory spirit pearl struggled left and right, but it seemed to be trapped in a transparent barrier. It constantly emitted banging noises, but it couldn't break free. The corner of Nya Li's mouth curved into a faint smile. He had long since made preparations. Even if the illusory spirit pearl didn't listen to his control, he still had a way to subdue it. The illusory spirit pearl might be an astonishing treasure, but it was nothing compared to a primordial divine artifact like the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. There was still a huge gap between them. "Come back." Nya Li extended his right hand, and the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting swiftly returned. The illusory spirit pearl was sucked into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The space within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was Nya Li's domain. As long as he entered, he could forget about coming out. Once he left the void illusionary divine palace, Nya Li could find some time to slowly subdue the illusory spirit pearl. As Nya Li flew through the air, he rapidly collected the artifacts and gold spiritual stone essences into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. There were hundreds of grade 4 and 5 artifacts, and over 100 pieces of gold spiritual stone essences. There were also all sorts of other treasures. It was a feast for the eyes. This was definitely an astonishing amount of wealth. Naturally, these things couldn't compare to the illusory spirit pearl. What puzzled Nieli was why the void illusionary divine palace's intent seemed to have disappeared into thin air while he was plundering these treasures. One must know that the void illusionary divine palace's intent had flown into a rage when Nieli had taken a piece of gold spiritual stone essence. Now that he'd taken so many of its treasures, why hadn't it reacted at all? Nieli continued to search towards the end of the void. Hundreds of towering stone pillars in the distance attracted his attention. These stone pillars stood in the void. Every single one of them was dozens of meters tall and covered in all kinds of inscription patterns. The mottled traces showed that they've been here for millions of years. Nieli slightly furrowed his brows at the sight of these hundreds of stone pillars. They formed a mystical array. Although he couldn't determine how powerful this array was, there was one thing he was certain of. This array wasn't simple. Even a Tao of Dragon Realm expert or Martial Ancestor Realm expert would suffer a calamity upon entering the Grand Formation. The array floated in the air, roughly a few hundred meters in radius. Although I haven't studied this array thoroughly, I'll take it first. Nieli opened his right hand, and the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting shot out. It turned into a huge screen of light that enveloped the array. With a whoosh, the entire array was moved into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting by Nieli. Wait until I've studied this array thoroughly. Who knows, it might have some uses. Nieli thought to himself. After storing the array, he continued his search in the void. In the distance, a magnificent palace appeared in Nieli's line of sight. As he flew towards the majestic palace, he saw that it was a miniature version of the void illusionary divine palace. The buildings were exactly the same, except that it was much smaller. It was only a few thousand meters in radius, and the palace itself was only a few meters tall. This should be the core of the void illusionary divine palace. Nieli thought to himself. Who cares what it is? I'll take it first. I'll study it later. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting flew out of his hand once again. Chapter 405. Rumble. The core of the void illusionary divine palace, a colossal object several thousand meters in circumference, was moved into Nieli's myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nieli was so tired that he was gasping for breath after storing the colossal object in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nieli had to expend a great deal of heavenly energy to activate the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting in order to store the colossal object. After flying around and searching for a while, Nieli couldn't find anything else. Only then did he stop and fly back to where he came from. Xiaoyu looked at Nieli and said, I've gathered over 300 pieces of gold spiritual stone essences, over 500 grade 6 artifacts, and over 30 grade 7 artifacts. Nieli stared at the empty space. For some reason, he felt that the silence was a little strange. Why wasn't the void illusionary divine palace saying anything? The spiritual illusionary pearl shouldn't be the only true treasures in the void illusionary divine palace. Perhaps the void illusionary divine palace's intent had hidden some of the treasures away. However, Nieli didn't know where to look in such a vast space. Nieli glanced at Xiaoyu and said, Follow me. The two figures turned into streaks of light and flew away. At this moment, a powerful intent enveloped the entire void illusionary divine palace. Everyone within the palace could feel a terrifying pressure bearing down on them. The experts couldn't help but raise their heads to look at the sky. That terrifying energy felt like it was going to make their bodies explode. Uft, uft, uft. Some of the weaker experts in the outer hall violently vomited blood under the terrifying pressure. Some even died on the spot. Everyone was frightened out of their wits. A Martial Ancestor Realm expert had arrived. A cold snort was heard in the air. Everyone in the void illusionary divine palace, listen up. I am Xianming Shenzhen of the Yaoshan sect. Anyone who has come to the void illusionary divine palace is not allowed to leave without permission. The Void Illusionary Divine Palace is under the control of the Yaoshan sect. Hand over all your treasures before you can leave. Otherwise, all of you will die here. It was Xianming Shenzhen's voice. Like a clap of thunder, it landed in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. The experts in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace exchanged looks. Even those from the Yaoshan sect couldn't help feeling depressed. Xianming Shenzhen was the most unreasonable Wuzong expert in the Yaoshan sect. Once Xianming Shenzhen made his move, even they wouldn't be able to bring the treasures out of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace, unless they had treasures that Xianming Shenzhen did not fancy. However, they definitely wouldn't get a share of the gold, spiritual stone essences. With Xianming Shenzhen's arrival, the experts from the various sects no longer thought about searching for treasures. Instead, they were thinking about how to escape. Several experts tried to escape the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. However, they hadn't even made it a few hundred meters before their bodies exploded into pieces. The others who wanted to escape immediately retreated. Their scalps turned numb at the sight. The entire Void Illusionary Divine Palace was under Xianming Shenzhen's control. Hierarch Blacknether glanced at the group of powerhouses and snorted coldly, courting death. Xianming Shenzhen's intent swept through the entire Void Illusionary Divine Palace. There was one area that even his intent couldn't enter. He couldn't enter at all. He snorted coldly and sent a palm strike towards that area. Boom! The palm energy exploded. Xianming Shenzhen furrowed his brows. His palm energy was blocked by a barrier, and he couldn't break through it. The treasures of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace must have been hidden within the barrier. However, the almighty expert who'd left behind the Void Illusionary Divine Palace was obviously extremely powerful. Breaking through the barrier wouldn't be an easy task. Xianming Shenzhen abruptly opened his eyes, which shot out rays of black light. It swept across the barrier. Humph! You want to stop me with just this barrier? Xianming Shenzhen's palm energy grabbed the barrier in the void. He began to study the structure of the barrier. At this moment, within the barrier, Nia Li and Xiao, you were still searching for treasures. In this vast void, there was nothing to be found. There was a huge commotion outside, but not a single sound reached here. If he had known that Xianming Shenzhen was coming, he would not have dared to do so. Nia Li probably wouldn't be as relaxed as he was right now. He had to find a way to escape. Suddenly, a scarlet light streaked across an area a few thousand meters away from Nia Li and Xiaoyu. Nia Li's brows twitched as a trace of a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You want to run? No way. Nia Li soared through the sky. At the sight of this, Xiaoyu immediately caught up to Nia Li and chased after the scarlet light. Nia Li chased after the scarlet light. The scarlet light was like a meteor, dragging a long trail of flames behind it. The black and white wings on Nia Li's back suddenly flapped. His speed increased explosively, and he moved like a bolt of lightning. With a wave of his right hand, the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting flew out. A boundless space enveloped the scarlet light. The scarlet light constantly struggled, as if it wanted to break free. Nia Li furrowed his brows. You want to run? Not so easy. Nia Li constantly circulated his heavenly energy. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting suction force grew stronger and stronger. A boundless energy wrapped around the scarlet light, firmly binding it. The scarlet light seemed to be unable to break free. It turned into a streak of light and disappeared into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The scarlet light was sucked into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting by Nia Li. How could it be so easy? Nia Li furrowed his brows. He could feel that the scarlet light was far from exhausted. It was practically taking the initiative to enter the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Is there something wrong? Xiaoyu couldn't help asking Nia Li. Why did Nia Li look so worried after keeping the scarlet light? I've been tricked. Nye Li bitterly smiled. He quickly sent his intent into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The painting's appearance had changed. Aside from the floating deities' lakes, there was also a huge array formed by stone pillars. There was also a void, illusionary divine palace that was several thousand meters in diameter. Nye Li had no idea where the scarlet light had gone. He scanned the painting with his intent, but he couldn't find any trace of it. Something was indeed wrong. Nye Li bitterly smiled in his heart. However, it was too late for regrets. Nye Li quickly transmitted a message to Plume Flame Godnese. Big Sister Plume Flame, you have to be careful. I don't know what entered the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Even I can't find it. Plume Flame Godnese was cultivating in one of the deities' lakes when she heard Nye Li's words. She nodded and said, I got it. I'll be careful. Although she didn't know what Nye Li was talking about, Plume Flame Godnese quickly became vigilant. Nye Li no longer had any interest in searching for treasures after putting that mysterious thing into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. He had to find that scarlet light and get it out of the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Chapter 406. Not long after the scarlet light drilled into Nye Li's myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting rumble, an earth-shattering sound rang out. The entire space showed signs of collapsing as a boundless energy seeped into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nye Li's brows twitched when he sensed the powerful energy. It was actually a martial ancestor realm expert. The 1,000 illusionary soul bewildering array outside had been broken. A martial ancestor realm expert would definitely be attracted. Nye Li's heart trembled. He looked at Xiaoyu and said, Let's enter the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Xiaoyu was a little puzzled. Could it be that living creatures could enter Nye Li's space? She hadn't heard Nye Li mention it before. She only knew that Nye Li's myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was very powerful. However, she didn't know what it could do. Nye Li raised his right hand, and the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting flew out, sucking Xiaoyu inside. I have to think of a way to get out. Otherwise, the demon blood sacrifice's power will be gone. Nye Li couldn't help thinking. He didn't know if there were any hidden treasures in the void, illusionary divine palace. However, Nye Li didn't have the time to search for them. After some thought, Nye Li quickly entered the stone array and prepared to leave. The stone array was on the verge of collapsing. Once it did, the son of fire, venerable god Thunder, and the others would come out. That would be troublesome. Nye Li quickly flew to the entrance and met up with Yen Yang. When Yen Yang saw Nye Li, he stood up and asked, I can sense that the palace is collapsing. What's going on? A martial ancestor realm expert is trying to break the void, illusionary divine palace's barrier. We have to get out quickly. Nye Li said, I can feel the aura of the martial ancestor realm. It must be an expert from the Yao Shen sect. Hearing Nye Li's words, even Yen Yang couldn't help but feel surprised. How exactly did Nye Li know? Moreover, he was actually able to determine that the other party was an expert from the Yao Shen sect. There were too many secrets on Nye Li's body, which aroused boundless curiosity in others. I must return to Hagami Munyan alive. Please help me, brother Yen Yang. Nye Li cupped his hands and said to Yen Yang, I will do my best. Yen Yang nodded. Two figures ran toward the exit. After a while, the ethereal stone array quickly collapsed, and the people trapped in the ethereal stone array were rescued. Wuyazi looked at the void in the distance, then back at the way back. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He'd originally wanted to scheme against Nye Li and Xiaoyu, but he'd never imagined that he'd be tricked by Nye Li and Xiaoyu. Only later did he realize that Nye Li must have taken Xiaoyu out of the stone array. Wuyazi wondered where Nye Li and Xiaoyu were. He immediately flew toward the exit. Only by blocking the exit would he be able to stop Nye Li and Xiaoyu. Son of Fire raised his head to look at the void above him. A trace of joy appeared in his eyes. His master was finally here. As long as his master was here, no one would be able to take the treasures out of the void, illusionary, divine palace. Son of Fire pondered for a moment, then led a large group of people towards the exit. Only venerable God Thunder furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment, then flew into the endless void. He wasn't willing to give up. He wanted to find the hidden treasures of the void, illusionary, divine palace. Rumble. The barrier finally collapsed, and a powerful force entered the void to search for the hidden treasures of the void, illusionary, divine palace. With Xianming Shenzhen's strength, searching the entire void, illusionary, divine palace was a piece of cake. He quickly discovered a black flame hidden in the depths of the void, illusionary, divine palace. What's that? Xianming Shenzhen frowned. Even with his knowledge, he couldn't figure out the origin of the black flame. Perhaps it was a hidden treasure of the void, illusionary, divine palace. He sent his intent towards the black flame. The moment his intent came into contact with the black flame, Xianming Shenzhen let out a mournful scream. Who dares to plot against me? Xianming Shenzhen's intent was ignited by the black flame. His left eye ignited with a blazing black flame. Sensing that the black flame wanted to burn his intent to ashes, Xianming Shenzhen immediately cut off his intent. Puff! Asterisk Hierarch Blacknether's consciousness was cut into two, and the severed consciousness quickly dissipated under the burning of the black fire. Xianming Shenzhen gasped for breath. He was furious. Although he decisively severed his intent and hadn't been killed by the black flame, he'd still suffered heavy injuries. From the heavenly realm to the Tao of Dragon, 9 lives returned to one, and one could be killed at any time. At the martial ancestor realm, aside from 9 lives returning to one, one's physical body would decay, and one's soul would return to one. In other words, a martial ancestor realm expert's soul was their body, and their body was their soul. Once their soul was burned, they would be finished. Only by breaking through the martial ancestor realm and reaching the legendary realm could one be called a god. Half of Xianming Shenzhen's soul had been burned away, and his cultivation had been greatly reduced. He flew into a rage. If he wanted to return to his current state, he'd have to bitterly cultivate for at least 30 years. 30 years of cultivation had gone up in smoke in a single night. How could he not be angry? He'd searched the entire void, illusionary, divine palace, but he hadn't found a single treasure. Could it be that all the treasures in the void, illusionary, divine palace had already been taken? Xianming Shenzhen gazed at the void, illusionary, divine palace. Everyone was trapped inside. He definitely wouldn't let anyone leave with the treasures. Hierarch Blacknether's deep voice resounded throughout the void, illusionary, divine palace. Anyone who wishes to leave the void, illusionary, divine palace must leave behind their interspatial ring. Otherwise, they will be killed without mercy. In the entire void, illusionary, divine palace, aside from the DemonGods sect, there were also people from the other 8 major sects. Furthermore, many of them were holy sons and holy maidens. Although Hierarch Blacknether was powerful and had a transcendent position in the DemonGods sect, he didn't dare to take things too far. If he slaughtered everyone in the void, illusionary, divine palace, he'd offend even more people. Most people could kill if they wanted to, but the holy sons and holy maidens of the major sects wouldn't dare to kill them so easily. Although the Yao Shen sect could contend against several major sects, if the martial ancestor realm experts of the major sects joined forces to deal with Xianming Shenzhen, the Yao Shen sect would only be able to provide him with some protection. In the end, he'd have to deal with the problem himself. Furthermore, he'd just lost 30 years of cultivation to the Black Flames. He was at his weakest. A group of Yao Shan sect's experts stood guard at the entrance of the void, illusionary, divine palace. They were like wolves and tigers as they fiercely stared at the people coming out of the palace. Here's my interspatial ring. one of the Hagami Munyon's experts threw his interspatial ring to the Yaoshan sex experts. His eyes flashed with anger as he walked towards the exit. Wait! Several Yaoshan sex experts stopped him. The Hagami Munyon's expert angrily asked, I've already given it to you. What else do you want? You actually dared to hide it? You must be tired of living. The Yaoshan sex experts grabbed the Hagami Munyon's expert and stripped him of his clothes. 2 artifacts fell out. Kill him. Asterisk blood splattered as the Hagami Munyon's expert was killed with a single slash. Chapter 407. Seeing this scene, those people who were planning to bluff their way out were trembling. If they wanted to leave this place, they had to obediently hand over the treasures. Wuyazi flew around looking for Nieli and Xiaoyu. He couldn't help but frown. This Xianming Shenzhen was extremely difficult to deal with. He was the one person in the whole Yaoshan sect that he didn't want to encounter the most. Wuyazi was very depressed. Now, even if he could kill Nieli and seize the treasures on Nieli, it was estimated that those treasures would eventually fall into the hands of Xianming Shenzhen. Even he would have to spit out all the treasures he had obtained before. Would he still go back empty-handed without getting anything? Wuyazi was very depressed. He couldn't accept it. Just as Wuyazi flew away, 2 people flew out in front of him. It was Nieli and Yan. At this time, Nieli had returned to his human form. Seeing Nieli, Wuyazi raised his eyebrows and stood in front of Nieli. He stared at Nieli and said in a deep voice, Nieli, we meet again. Yan and Nieli stopped. Yan looked at Nieli and asked with a voice transmission, Who is this guy? Do you want to kill him? Nieli thought for a moment and shook his head. He said with a voice transmission, No need to kill him. Wuyazi stared vigilantly at Yan next to Nieli. He had seen Yan strength. Once Yan made a move, he was definitely not his opponent. Nieli smiled and said, Brother Wuyazi, we have fulfilled our agreement with each other. Next, we will go our separate ways. I hope we won't be enemies the next time we meet. Wuyazi glanced around and was a little puzzled. Why wasn't Xiaoyu with Nieli? Could it be that he had misunderstood Nieli? Xiaoyu was not taken away by Nieli. Could it be that Xiaoyu had already died in the stone array? We agreed that we would split the treasures equally. Wuyazi looked at Nieli and said, But I didn't get my share. Nieli spread out his hands with a bitter smile and said, What's the point of arguing about this? One of your demon race's martial ancestor realm experts has taken control of the entire void illusionary divine palace. Even if I give you half of the treasures, you won't be able to take them out. Can I take it out? Wuyazi raised his eyebrows and said, I'm afraid that won't go as you wish. I didn't obtain any treasures in the void illusionary divine palace. Nieli said indifferently, Even if you search my body, I have nothing to give you. Nieli wouldn't allow Wuyazi to search his body. After all, Wuyazi had personally seen him take many treasures. If he didn't have anything in his interspatial ring, then Wuyazi would definitely be suspicious. I don't believe your nonsense. Wuyazi was extremely depressed. He'd thought that Nieli was under his control along the way, but only now did he realize that. But now, he discovered that Nieli was already prepared. With an expert like Yan by his side, Wuyazi couldn't do anything to Nieli. Did he have to let Nieli take the demon blood sacrifice's energy out of the void illusionary divine palace? I can forget about the treasures you've obtained, but you have to return the demon blood sacrifice's energy to me. Wuyazi transmitted his voice to Nieli as he swept a glance at Yan. He was thinking about how to get rid of Nieli before Yan could react. However, Yan's cold gaze made Wuyazi understand that he had no chance of making a move. It's impossible for me to return the demon blood sacrifice's energy to you. If you want to stop me from leaving the void illusionary divine palace, then we can discuss it with Xianming Shenzhen or the Son of Fire. Nieli looked at Wuyazi. He'd already grasped Wiyazi's Achilles heel. Wiyazi's face turned ashen. Wasn't he courting death by going to Xianming Shenzhen, or the Son of Fire? If they found out that he'd given the demon blood sacrifice's energy to a human, only death awaited him. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking about how to get rid of me. I understand that you still have a chance with Yan Yang protecting me. You might even be able to find someone stronger than Yan Yang. But don't you find it strange? Where did Xiao Yu go? Nia Li transmitted his voice to Wiyazi. I've already arranged for Xiao Yu to leave safely. If you and I don't say anything, then we'll mind our own business and pretend that nothing happened. If you insist on finding trouble with me, then it'll be a life and death struggle. Yan Yang didn't know what Nia Li and Wiyazi were talking about, but he could tell from Wiyazi's expression that Nia Li was negotiating with Wiyazi. That's impossible. Xianming Shenzhen controls the entire void illusionary divine palace. It's impossible for you to send Xiao Yu out. If you can send her out, then why don't you go out yourself? Wiyazi stared at Nia Li. Nothing is impossible. Nia Li looked at Wiyazi with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Wiyazi recalled Nia Li's various miracles. His heart was in an intense dilemma. If Xiao Yu had really left, then even if he killed Nia Li, Xiao Yu would still make sure he died without a burial. You're saying that we'll mind our own business from now on? Wiyazi looked at Nia Li and muttered to himself. Although Nia Li was a great threat to him, he could only tolerate the existence of this threat. That's right. Nia Li nodded. Wiyazi rolled his eyes and nodded. All right. Nia Li looked at Wiyazi with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Don't even think about borrowing Xianming Shenzhen's hand to kill me. If I don't make it back alive, then I'll have Xiao Yu spread the news of the demon blood sacrifice. You can give it a try. Wiyazi was extremely depressed. Nia Li had seen through all the thoughts that flashed through his mind. Up to you. In any case, if I die, you won't be any better off. The demon race will spare no effort to hunt down any human who has been subjected to the demon blood sacrifice. As long as I expose you, even if you run to the ends of the earth, you won't be able to live. Your sect won't be able to protect you. Wiyazi coldly snorted and turned to leave. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Brother Wiyazi, I don't want you to die. In the future, we might have to communicate more. Instead of being enemies, we can at least be friends. Nia Li smiled and transmitted his voice. Wiyazi almost missed a step. Was there a friend like Nia Li? Seeing that Wiyazi had left, Yan Yang looked at Nia Li and asked, The matter between you two has been resolved. Nia Li nodded and smiled. Looking at Wiyazi's departing back, Nia Li had a feeling that he and Wiyazi would meet sooner or later. Yan Yang didn't know the conversation between Nia Li and Wiyazi. However, he could feel that Wiyazi should have been fooled by Nia Li. He didn't know what method Nia Li had used to make a demon race cover for him. Yan Yang couldn't see through Nia Li more and more. We have to leave quickly. Otherwise, if the Son of Fire catches up with us, there might be trouble. Nia Li said, All right. The two of them flew away. Chapter 408. At the exit of the void illusionary divine palace, a group of people were being interrogated by the experts of the Yaoshan sect. From time to time, a few human experts would get into conflict with the Yaoshan sect and get killed. Xianming Shenzhen had been thwarted in the void illusionary divine palace, and he'd become even more furious. His subordinates had become even more unbridled, and they'd kill anyone they disliked. In any case, they had Xianming Shenzhen's support. What did they have to be afraid of? Nia Li looked at Xianming Shenzhen, who was hovering in the sky. With such a martial ancestor realm expert present, it wouldn't be easy for him to escape, even with Yan Yang's help. What should he do? Nia Li's mind was spinning rapidly. Yan Yang transmitted his voice to Nia Li. This Xianming Shenzhen is a very difficult person to deal with. However, there are still some people he's afraid of. I'm the holy son of the Skyblaze sect, so he won't casually make a move against me. However, it's hard to say for others, especially since you're only at the heavenly fate realm. It'll be very dangerous for you to stay by my side. He won't casually make a move against me, but he might kill the people around me to establish his might. The conflict between the Skyblaze sect and the Yaoshin sect had been going on for a long time. However, that was a conflict between sections. In private, martial ancestor realm experts wouldn't rashly start a war. After all, once they reached the martial ancestor realm, their goal was to advance a step further. Wasting their divine soul for no reason was an unwise move. Unless it was a conflict of interest between sects, they would normally be afraid of each other. Killing the Skyblaze sect's holy son might cause the Skyblaze sect's martial ancestor realm experts to make a move against Xianming Shenzhen. Xianming Shenzhen didn't want that to happen. However, if it was just the people around Yanyang, then Xianming Shenzhen wouldn't have to worry about anything. Senior brother Yanyang, instead of waiting here, why don't we take a gamble? If I go alone, it will be even more dangerous. The people from Yaoshin sect will definitely kill me. If we follow behind you, we still have a chance. Nieli said. He could only hope that Xianming Shenzhen did not notice them. Yanyang thought about it and nodded. That was indeed the case. It was impossible for Nieli to leave the void illusionary divine palace by himself. We have to hurry. If we wait for the Son of Fire to come out, it will be troublesome. Yanyang thought for a moment and reminded. The Son of Fire was Xianming Shenzhen's disciple. The two flew out of the void illusionary divine palace. You too, a heavenly axis, realm 9-stage expert from the Yaoshin sect, extended his hand towards Yanyang. Yanyang coldly snorted as a powerful energy enveloped his body. Bang! The heavenly axis, realm 9-stage expert's energy was rebounded. He looked at Yanyang in astonishment. After all, Yanyang was only at the heavenly axis realm, but his strength had already far surpassed his own. Yanyang waved his right hand and threw the items in his hand to the Yaoshin sect expert. This is all we have. The Yaoshin sect expert furrowed his brows. If they fought again, he definitely wouldn't be Yanyang's opponent. If that happened, he'd definitely suffer a loss. That would be very shameful. He coldly snorted as his face darkened. His gaze swept across Yanyang and Nieli. Yanyang and Nieli didn't have anything on them. He glanced at Yanyang's interspatial ring. The Yaoshin sect expert's eyes lit up. The Yaoshin sect expert waved his hand and said, "At least you're tactful." Scram! Yanyang and Nieli hurriedly walked past with their heads lowered. They could feel a powerful intent sweeping across their bodies. Nieli felt a suffocating pressure. This was Xianming Shenzhen examining them. After a brief moment, that powerful intent retracted. Yanyang had nothing on him. Xianming Shenzhen definitely couldn't sense the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting in Nieli's soul realm. Aside from that, there was nothing on him. Xianming Shenzhen probably couldn't be bothered to make a move against a heavenly fate realm like Nieli. Xianming Shenzhen swept his gaze across Nieli and Yanyang. He retracted his gaze. Since he didn't want to kill Yanyang, he'd just pretend he hadn't seen anything. In the distance, Wiyazi frowned as he watched Nieli and Yanyang leave. He was a little puzzled. Could it be that Nieli and Yanyang had obediently handed over the treasures? That didn't make sense. Nieli definitely wouldn't be so obedient. There was definitely something fishy going on here. Wiyazi pondered for a moment, then retracted his gaze. It didn't matter if Nieli had taken the treasures or not. There was nothing he could do to Nieli. If Xianming Shenzhen or the Son of Fire found out about the demon blood sacrifice, he'd definitely die without a burial. After Nieli and Yanyang left the void illusionary divine palace, they flew away. An hour later, the Son of Fire flew out of the void illusionary divine palace. "Master." The Son of Fire bowed towards Xianming Shenzhen. Xianming Shenzhen nodded slightly and asked, "Disciple, did you find anything in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace?" "Master, the Void Illusionary Divine Palace's mechanisms are extremely complicated. I didn't find anything," the Son of Fire said gloomily. However, he didn't dare to tell his master that Nieli had tricked him. It'd be extremely embarrassing. Xianming Shenzhen's expression turned a little unsightly. "I broke the Void Illusionary Divine Palace's barrier, but why didn't I find anything?" "Master, how many people did you see?" the Son of Fire asked. "How many people? Who?" Xianming Shenzhen furrowed his brows. "Wuyazi, Yenyang, and 2 strangers," the Son of Fire said. "Wuyazi is in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. As for Yenyang, he's already left." Xianming Shenzhen said, "He's the holy son of the Skyblaze sect, the disciple of that old fart. I don't want to have a falling out with him for now." Previously, Xianming Shenzhen's strength was slightly inferior to Yen Yang's master, not to mention that the black flames had burned away so much of his intent. That's why he'd let Yen Yang leave. The Son of Fire hurriedly said, "Master, they might have already taken the treasures out of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace." "That's impossible. How could the 2 of them take the treasures out under my watch?" Xianming Shenzhen shook his head. He'd already used his intent to search for Nieli and Yenyang. However, he hadn't found anything that Nieli and Yenyang had taken. "Although I don't know what's going on, I'm certain that there's something wrong with Yenyang," the Son of Fire said anxiously. Xianming Shenzhen furrowed his brows at the Son of Fire's words. His right hand moved, and he tossed a ring to the Son of Fire. "This is Yen Yang's interspatial ring. Take a look." The Son of Fire swept a glance at it and said, "Although there are some decent things inside, Yen Yang has definitely hidden a portion of them. Master, hurry up and stop him. Don't let him escape." A cold light flashed through Xianming Shenzhen's eyes when he heard the Son of Fire's words. He slightly furrowed his brows. In this world, there were still treasures that could hide things from him. If that was the case, he'd definitely chase after Yenyang and bring them back. Xianming Shenzhen coldly snorted. He turned into a streak of light and instantly disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 409. Roughly 10 minutes later, Xianming Shenzhen's intent swept across the vast land and quickly discovered Yenyang. A powerful aura locked onto Yenyang. "I wonder why Lord Xianming Shenzhen is chasing after me." Yenyang cupped his hands. It was just as Nie Li had predicted. He'd follow Nie Li's instructions and do his best to delay Xianming Shenzhen. "Yenyang, did you obtain any treasures from the Void Illusionary Divine Palace? If you leave any treasures behind, I can spare your life today. But if you insist on going about things the wrong way, then you know the consequences." Xianming Shenzhen coldly snorted. At Xianming Shenzhen's words, Yenyang slightly bowed and said, "Lord Xianming Shenzhen, I don't quite understand. I've already handed over all my belongings. I don't have anything on me anymore. Yenyang, don't blame me for disregarding your master's feelings if you dare to deceive me." Xianming Shenzhen coldly said, "I wouldn't dare to deceive Lord Xianming Shenzhen. Please tell me, Lord Xianming Shenzhen, where did I go wrong?" Yenyang cupped his hands. Yen Yang's calm and confident expression made Xianming Shenzhen a little suspicious. Could it be that Yenyang really didn't have any treasures on him? Suddenly he recalled that there was someone beside Yenyang. That person was only a heavenly fate realm cultivator. He hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now that that heavenly fate realm cultivator had disappeared, it was extremely suspicious. "Yenyang, where did that person beside you go?" Xianming Shenzhen asked with his brows knitted. "Someone beside me? Are you talking about that heavenly fate realm servant?" Yenyang was stunned for a moment before he continued. "Oh, you're talking about him? That brat spoke impudently when he came out, so I killed him in a fit of anger." Killed? There was no way Xianming Shenzhen would believe Yan Yang's words. There was definitely something wrong with the Heaven's Fate realm next to Yan Yang. Yan Yang must have given the treasure to that person. I don't believe a heavenly fate realm can escape from my grasp. Xianming Shenzhen's intent swept out to search for traces of Nieli. Logically speaking, with Xianming Shenzhen's strength, coupled with the fact that he had previously come into contact with Nieli's aura, he should be able to find Nieli soon. However, no traces of Nieli could be found in a large area nearby. He couldn't find it. Xianming Shenzhen was furious. With a wave of his right hand, a majestic force wrapped around Yan Yang and carried Yan Yang away. A few hours later, Xianming Shenzhen still couldn't find Nieli's location. A heavenly fate realm, no matter how fast his flying speed was, couldn't possibly run out of such a large area. Xianming Shenzhen, I've said it before, he has already been killed by me. You just don't believe me. Yan Yang pretended to be innocent and said, "Courting death." Xianming Shenzhen's expression was frighteningly dark. He reached out his hand to grab Yan Yang. He vented all his anger on Yan Yang. Since Yan Yang wasn't willing to reveal Nieli's whereabouts, there was no point in keeping him alive. Just as his hand was about to grab Yan Yang's body, he heard a bang, and the force was repelled. A loud voice came from the void. "Xianming, how did my disciple offend you? Why are you so ruthless towards him?" Xianming Shenzhen's heart trembled. That old ghost is here. He had just been plotted against. With his current strength, if he were to fight against that old ghost, not only would he have no chance of winning, he might even be killed. He absolutely couldn't fight recklessly. "Old ghost, your disciple deceived me with flowery words. Killing him is already a light punishment." Xianming Shenzhen naturally wouldn't show any weakness, lest he was seen through. "Hierarch Blacknether, since I'm here, let my disciple go. Otherwise, I won't let him go. Otherwise, if we fight, it won't benefit either of us." The voice came from the end of the void. He's lucky today. I'll let him go for now." Xianming Shenzhen had already searched Yan Yang's body. He even used his heavenly energy to check Yan Yang's body, but he didn't find anything on Yan Yang's body. Even if there was a treasure, it was very likely that it had been sent away. Now that the old ghost was here, if he wanted to kill Yan Yang, he would have to pay a great price. Xianming Shenzhen turned around and flew away. "Master." Yan Yang cupped his hands towards the void. "Xianming is a little strange today. He actually gave up so easily. But forget it. Since there's nothing else, then come back." The voice came from the void again. Yan Yang nodded and flew off into the distance. Void Illusionary Divine, Palace the Son of Fire, looked at Xianming Shenzhen, who'd just returned. He bowed and asked, "Master, how is it? Did you catch Yan Yang?" Yan Yang didn't have any treasures on him. "Hierarch," Blacknether said. His heart was filled with anger as he recalled his trip to the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Not only had he failed to obtain any treasures, but he'd also suffered a huge loss. His black flames had burned away so many of his spirits. No treasures? The Son of Fire furrowed his brows. "Master, did you see anyone with Yan Yang?" After hearing the Son of Fire's words, Xianming Shenzhen was even more certain that there was a problem with the Heavenly Fate Realm expert by Yan Yang's side. "I've already memorized his aura. Even if he escapes this time, I'll definitely catch him next time." Xianming Shenzhen coldly snorted. His gaze was deep. Since that person was, by Yan Yang's side, he should be from the Skyblaze sect. He had to send someone to investigate the Skyblaze sect first. Also, find an opportunity to kill Yan Yang. That person might end up in Yan Yang's hands after obtaining the treasures. "Yes." The Son of Fire replied. Wiyazi's treasures were also searched, and he was interrogated. In the end, he could only return in a sorry state. He was extremely depressed. He'd been busy with Nieli and Xiaoyu for so long, but he'd gotten nothing. At this moment, a scroll was buried roughly 30 meters deep in the ground, several dozen miles away from the void illusionary divine palace. It was the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Xianming Shenzhen had been tracking Nia Li's aura and traces of Nia Li. However, he didn't know that Nia Li had long since hidden himself in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. With its power hidden, the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was no different from an ordinary scroll. Worried that Xianming Shenzhen was still nearby, Nia Li decided to cultivate in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nia Li sat cross-legged in the air, continuously condensing his cultivation and circulating the power of the demon blood sacrifice. Previously, Nia Li had only circulated a small portion of his power, but he'd already made several breakthroughs. To avoid being killed by Wuyazi, Nia Li hadn't dared to raise his cultivation too quickly. Now that he had time to cultivate in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, Nia Li naturally couldn't wait to unleash the full power of the demon blood sacrifice. That was the primordial demon blood. During this trip to the void illusionary divine palace, Nia Li felt that his strength was insufficient. He was about to step into the heavenly star realm. Chapter 410. The power of the primordial bloodline continued to flow through Nia Li's meridians. It was like a scorching hot lava, constantly surging. The blazing energy constantly battered Nia Li's limbs and meridians. The power of the demon blood sacrifice continued to strengthen Nia Li's cultivation. In his soul realm, the fate star in the center of the 9 fate souls suddenly blossomed with a dazzling light. Nia Li felt as if his entire body was about to explode. Every part of his body was illuminated by the starlight, as if they were about to explode. Every person's body was made up of billions of tiny units, each of which contained boundless power. Under the illumination of the starlight, the power contained in these units seemed to be about to explode. Nia Li's eyes suddenly widened as a majestic power surged out of him. His aura crazily rose, and the fate star shone brighter and brighter. Its radiance covered all his fate souls. Heavenly star realm, 1 star realm. Compared to before, his cultivation had suddenly increased by several times. Most people who just reached the 1 star realm would be impatient to consolidate their cultivation. However, Nia Li was different. He directly infused his heavenly energy into the fate star. The fate star grew brighter and brighter. Under the stimulation of the fate star, the power of every unit in his body grew even more violent. Boom! Boom! His entire body surged with power as if it were about to explode. However, Nia Li understood that he had the primordial bloodline of the demon clan. His body wouldn't easily explode, so he continued to stimulate the fate star. If he missed this opportunity, it would be very difficult to wait for a second one in his life. While stimulating the fate star with heavenly energy, Nia Li continued to condense the Heavenly God cultivation technique and cultivate the second stage of the Heavenly God cultivation technique. Formless body. The form is born from the heart. The heart gives birth to formlessness. Nia Li constantly chanted as he circulated the power of the demon blood sacrifice to refine his body. While Nia Li was cultivating, a faintly discernible intent fell on Nia Li. He actually has a treasure like the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. What he cultivates is a peerless divine art, and he also has the power of the demon blood sacrifice. This person is really not simple. The will silently said, if a heavenly star level cultivator wanted to have Nia Li's luck, it would be impossible. That was an extremely difficult task. However, leave your body to me. The thought laughed and turned into a cold light that shot towards Nia Li. Seeing that the cold light was about to hit Nia Li suddenly opened his eyes. With a whoosh, he disappeared on the spot. That cold light missed, and just as it was wondering where Nia Li had gone, Nia Li had already appeared several miles away. I finally found you. Nia Li stared at the intent. While he was cultivating, he was constantly paying attention to the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, keeping his guard up. Nya Li finally saw the other party's true appearance. It was a clump of azure mist, without a physical form. The azure mist slowly said, "I never thought that you'd be able to guard against my attacks while cultivating. It seems that I have underestimated you." The green mist said slowly, "That voice belonged to the Void Illusionary Divine Palace." The Void Illusionary Divine Palace's intent had been absorbed into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting by Nya Li. "You didn't just underestimate me. You made a huge mistake. You shouldn't have entered the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The space inside the painting is my domain." Nya Li lightly smiled. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was now Nya Li's life-bound treasure. Nya Li could control everything inside the painting. The intent proudly said, "Even if the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting is your domain, you don't know what I am. It's impossible for you to trap me." The wisp of thought proudly said. Nya Li tried to use the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting's domain to restrain that fellow, but he discovered that it was formless. That thing was formless. Although he could sense its existence, he couldn't control it at all. "Even if this is your domain, I can move freely here. It's no different from my domain. Furthermore, you made a huge mistake. You moved the Void Illusionary Divine Array and the Void Illusionary Divine Palace into the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The space inside the painting is your domain, but the Void Illusionary Divine Palace is mine. What can you do to me?" The intent laughed. "I failed this time. At worst, I'll just forget about it. I'll find another opportunity. One day I'll succeed." With a whoosh, the intent disappeared once again. Nya Li saw that strand of intent enter the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Nya Li wanted to investigate the Void Illusionary Divine Palace, but he discovered that his intent was blocked outside. The corner of Nya Li's mouth rose into a smile. Did the intent of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace think it'd be fine after hiding inside? He was only in the Heavenly Star Realm, so he naturally couldn't do anything to it. However, he couldn't stay in the Heavenly Star Realm forever. Did the intent of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace think it could hide from him? Nya Li paid no attention to it and continued to condense his cultivation. Within the Void Illusionary Divine Palace, the intent looked at Nya Li, who was quietly cultivating. It was extremely depressed. It was only a strand of intent. If it fought Nya Li head-on, it definitely wouldn't be a match for Nya Li. It never imagined that Nya Li would be so vigilant. He'd actually been on guard for a long time. It originally wanted to provoke Nya Li and lure Nya Li into attacking the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. However, Nya Li wasn't fooled at all. This fellow was only a 15 or 16-year-old human youth. How could he be so difficult to deal with? Nya Li continued to condense his cultivation. At that moment, he no longer felt the flow of time. Activating the demon blood energy, Nya Li continued to strengthen the changes in his physical body. Suddenly, Nya Li's eyes widened as 3 pieces of gold spiritual stone essences floated beside him. Pow! 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 The 3 pieces of gold spiritual stone essences exploded into dust, and surges of heavenly energy surged into Nya Li's body. Shortly after, a huge vortex formed around Nya Li. The heavenly energy within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting surged and converged towards Nya Li's body. It was like a Kuan Pung swallowing and spitting. The might of the heavenly energy caused the trees below to rustle. Some of the demonic beasts that were reared in the trees scattered in fright. Using the 3 pieces of gold spiritual stone essence as a guide, Nya Li began to frantically absorb the heavenly energy. His entire soul realm was like a balloon that wildly swelled. The heavenly energy continued to swell. It continuously stimulated the fated star. Poof! Next to the fated star, a second fated star flickered. Nia Li's brows twitched. He didn't expect it to be so fast. In his previous life, he'd spent over 2 years cultivating from one faded star to 2. In this life, only a few moments had passed. But after thinking about it, it made sense. In his previous life, he'd had the temporal demon's spirit book. However, it wasn't a treasure that could assist in cultivation. Furthermore, the cultivation technique it contained wasn't powerful. In this life, aside from the heavenly god cultivation technique and the power of the demon blood sacrifice, he also had the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting and many other treasures, as well as the gold spiritual stone essence and other precious cultivation resources. His cultivation speed naturally couldn't be compared to his previous life. Chapter 411. Nia Li was like a Kuan Peng, constantly devouring the surrounding heavenly energy. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting stirred. Xiao Yu was startled by the frightening heavenly energy fluctuations around him. The commotion caused by Nia Li's cultivation was truly astonishing. It was hard to imagine just how frightening Nia Li's cultivation would be in the future. She didn't want her cultivation to be left far behind by Nia Li, so she closed her eyes and began to cultivate. A distant voice faintly echoed in her mind. Under the guidance of this voice, her consciousness gradually blurred, and she seemed to have fallen asleep. Time slowly passed in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Gu Clan, 8th Elder Gu Bai's secret chamber. 8th Uncle, I wonder if you've considered the matter I've discussed with you? I heard that Gu Heng doesn't treat you well. The ones he relies on the most are 3rd Uncle and 6th Uncle. Gu Bei smiled as she looked at the old man in front of her. The white-robed old man in front of her was the Gu clan's 8th elder, Gu Bai. Gu Bai narrowed his eyes as he looked at Gu Bei. Gu Bei, you've gone too far in destroying someone else's deity's lake. Even if it's for the patriarch's position, you can't do such a thing. Gu Heng wants to impeach you. As the 8th elder of the Gu clan, I have to uphold justice for the younger generation. Gu Bei inwardly spat. Gu Bai was a person who valued profit over righteousness. Who knows how many benefits Gu Heng had given him? Although that was what she was thinking, Gu Bei still smiled. I know that Elder Gu Bai is a righteous person. It's just that the matter of destroying Gu Heng's deity's lake was Gu Heng's one-sided statement. I merely snatched his deity's lake. He was useless, so he can't blame anyone else. Gu Bai tapped his finger on the table and said indifferently, What do you mean by that? I know that Gu Heng came to visit 8th Uncle. Please don't believe Gu Heng's nonsense. This is a small gift I've prepared for 8th Uncle. Please accept it. When it's done, I'll pay you a visit personally. Gu Bei took out a cloth bag from her interspatial ring and pushed it towards Gu Bai. Gu Bai seemed a little disdainful. The corner of his mouth twitched. Nephew Gu Bei, what do you mean by this? With a wave of his right hand, dozens of spiritual stone essences and a grade 6 artifact flew out from the cloth bag. Seeing this, Gu Bai's heart skipped a beat. Even an elder of his level only had a few 100,000 spirit stones in total. Gu Bei had given him dozens of spiritual stone essences, which were equivalent to tens of thousands of spiritual stones. He'd also given him a grade 6 artifact, which was equivalent to half of his assets. I heard that cousin Gu Heng gave 8th Uncle several thousand spirit stones. Isn't he a little too stingy? As long as 8th Uncle supports me, I will definitely prepare a generous gift once this matter is settled. Gu Bei faintly smiled and said, I know that 8th Uncle's cultivation is very hard and requires a lot of resources. If there's anything I can help you with in the future, I would like to thank you for your help. 8th Uncle, just say the word. What are you talking about, Nephew Gu Bei? As your uncle, of course, I will do my best to help you. Gu Bai said with a smile. Good. With 8th Uncle's words, I can rest assured. I still have to go to 9th Uncle's place, so I'll take my leave first. Gu Bei stood up and said, All right. Take care, Nephew Gu Bei. Gu Bai stood up and walked Gu Bei all the way to the door. He watched Gu Bei leave. He turned his head to look at the cloth bag on the table and muttered, I really didn't expect that Gu Bei would have such boldness now. Gu Hung, it's not that I don't want to help you. But how are you going to compete with Gu Bei? Gu Tung whispered in Gu Bei's ear, Young master, is Gu Bai, that old guy, willing to listen to you? Gu Bai is a man who values profit over morality. He's a two-faced rat. I don't believe that he won't take the bait. Gu Bei smiled faintly. After all these years in the Gu clan, he already knew the character of the Gu clan's elders like the back of his hand. Gu Hung is sinister and cunning, so birds of a feather flock together. The elders who support him are not good people. We'll slowly dismantle them one by one. The few of them went to visit another elder together. Gu Heng's courtyard. Reporting to young master, Gu Bei has just visited the 8th elder and is currently visiting the 9th elder. A servant hurriedly ran in and reported. Gu Heng snorted disdainfully and said, Does Gu Bei think that by paying a visit to these elders will support him? Wishful thinking. These elders have been friends with me for more than 10 years. Every year I send some gifts to their mansions. It's impossible for Gu Bei to get all these elders to support him just by visiting them. Gu Heng thought for a moment and said, Go and keep an eye on Gu Bei. Yes. The servant nodded and then retreated. Inside the Gu clan, there were some changes quietly. Within the Gu clan, the majority of the elders were neutral. They didn't care about worldly affairs and focused on cultivation. There were only a few who firmly stood on Gu Heng's side. If it weren't for Nya Li's powerful backing, Gu Bei wouldn't be able to do anything. But with Nya Li's backing, Gu Bei could do whatever he wanted without any worries. The spiritual stones Nya Li had given him were more than enough for him to use up in several years. It's hard to imagine just where did Nya Li get so many spiritual stones from. Gu Bei guessed that it had something to do with the deity root that Nya Li had obtained. Although Gu Bei had his own guesses, he did not ask for the details. One day, when Nya Li wanted to talk about it, he would naturally tell him. Dragon Seal family. Long Tianming was quietly sitting on a chair, listening to the servant's report with an old man in a gray robe. The old man's brows were sinister, and his skin was a peculiar silver gray. His eyes flickered with a sharp, cold light. The old man shook his head and sighed. The Demon League's recent expansion speed is indeed shocking. In my opinion, I'm afraid that Gu Heng isn't Gu Bei's match. The old man shook his head and sighed. He can't even deal with Gu Bei. He's simply a piece of trash. We've wasted so much effort to nurture him. Long Tianming said in a heavy voice, clearly a little annoyed. Gu Heng is related to our plan to control the Gu clan. We can't let him lose to Gu Bei so easily. Otherwise, everything we've done will be in vain. The old man frowned. However, Gu Heng's current financial strength is far from enough to help him develop. I've gained quite a lot from this trip to the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Here are 300,000 spiritual stones. Please give them to Gu Heng, elder. Although Gu Heng might mess things up, he can at least buy us some time. When the time is right, we'll turn Gu Bei into a cripple, just like Gu Lan. Long Tianming lightly smiled as a cold light flashed through his eyes. Oh, could it be that Tianming had some sort of fortuitous encounter in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace? The gray-robed old man asked in astonishment. I didn't have any fortuitous encounters. I only obtained quite a few spiritual stones. Long Tianming's eyes flashed with a vague light as he smiled. Chapter 412. Oh, so that's how it is. The gray-robed elder's gaze landed on Long Tianming as he spoke in a non-committal manner. Long Tianming changed the topic and said, This time I've obtained quite a few spiritual stones. It just so happens that I can use them to expand my strength. Previously, I sent so many Heavenly Access Realm experts to Gu Heng. Who would have thought that Gu Heng still wouldn't make it? But no matter what, I can't let Gu Bei's demon league rise. I must obtain the position of Hagami Munmun's patriarch. The gray-robed elder looked at Long Tianming and coldly said, I'll help you become the Hagami Munmun's patriarch. But don't forget what you promised me. Naturally, I won't. Long Tianming smiled. What Gu Bei and the rest didn't know was that while they were concentrating on dealing with Gu Heng, they were already being targeted. Inside the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains, painting Nye Li was still wholeheartedly cultivating. Violent and abundant heavenly energy continuously poured into Nye Li's soul realm. The amount of heavenly energy in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was simply enormous and endless. Day after day passed, with the primordial bloodline as his foundation. Nye Li could absorb the heavenly energy without any worries. His soul realm constantly expanded, as if it was being torn apart. The intense pain caused Nye Li's face to turn pale. His forehead was dripping with sweat. The heavenly energy felt like it was about to burst his body. Boom! His soul realm felt like it was about to explode. Buzz! Nye Li entered a mysterious state. He felt as if the vine in his soul realm was growing bigger and bigger. It was like a towering tree that constantly spread its branches and blossomed with mysterious flowers. These flowers were pure white and flawless, and their petals constantly drifted down. The fragrance of the flowers permeated the air, as if he had arrived at a blossoming spring. Nye Li could faintly feel that time and space had stopped under the vine. Just like that, he quietly sat cross-legged under the vine and cultivated, constantly condensing his cultivation base. Time passed quickly. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Nye Li had finally condensed his third fate star in his dantian. Nye Li was still sitting cross-legged. 3 months later, the fourth fate star, like a stone statue, he just sat there quietly without any movement. Nye Li's concept of time had also completely stopped. 6 months later, Nye Li's fifth fate star lit up in his soul realm. With a boom, Nye Li's mind seemed to explode again. He woke up from a muddled state. He stared blankly for a moment before opening his eyes. He didn't think that he'd been cultivating in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains, painting for so long. It's been 6 months. I wonder how Lu Piao and Gu Bei are doing. When Nye Li opened his eyes, he saw Xiao Yu staring blankly at him. Xiao Yu, why are you looking at me like that? Nye Li asked, puzzled. Xiao Yu's expression was as if she'd seen a ghost. Why do you think? In the blink of an eye, your cultivation went from 9 fate to the heavenly star realm. Moreover, it seems like you even broke through a few levels, Xiao Yu said in shock. Nye Li was also stunned by Xiao Yu's words. According to his concept of time, he'd been cultivating for 6 months. How could it be that in Xiao Yu's eyes, it had only been a blink of an eye? Thinking back to the mysterious state he'd felt earlier, Nye Li's heart trembled. Could it be because of the vine? Nye Li carefully recalled the feeling he'd felt earlier. Could it be that time and space had stopped? In this life, there was a mysterious vine in his soul realm. In his previous life, there was no such thing. Could it be because of this vine? Could it be related to the temporal demon's spirit book? Only the temporal demon's spirit book possessed such powerful space-time energy. Nye Li pondered for a moment. It was indeed possible that the temporal demon's spirit book had brought him back to this time and space. But in this life, the temporal demon's spirit book was no longer in the desert palace. After pondering for a moment, Nye Li took out one of the remnant pages of the temporal demon's spirit book and injected a trace of heavenly energy into it. The remnant page of the temporal demon's spirit book in his hand turned into specks of starlight, floated up, and entered Nye Li's body. Then it merged with the vine. Sure enough, that vine was indeed related to the temporal demon's spirit book. After the remnant page of the temporal demon's spirit book merged with the vine, Nye Li's heart suddenly began to beat wildly. It was as if time and space had stopped. It was that feeling from earlier again. Time and space had stopped. He sent his thoughts to the bottom of the vine. Petals fluttered in the air, creating a beautiful and dazzling scene. Nieli was ecstatic. This remnant page of the Temporal Demon Spirit book was actually one of the primers for stopping time and space. He immediately sat down cross-legged and began to condense his cultivation. Half a year later, Nieli condensed his 6th fate star. Another year later, Nieli condensed his 7th fate star. 3 years later, he condensed his 8th fate star. Nieli sat cross-legged like an old monk in meditation. At this moment, his soul realm was constantly revolving. The heavenly energy within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was constantly converging towards Nieli. 5 years later, the 9th fate star. The 9 fate stars constantly revolved, completely devouring the 9 fate souls. The 9 stars flickered, occasionally transforming into different shapes. Nieli's cultivation was finally only a step away from the heavenly axis realm. Nieli continued to cultivate. After another 10 years, Nieli had reached the pinnacle of the heavenly star realm. However, no matter how much he tried to raise his cultivation, he was stuck at the 9 stars realm. If he wanted to reach the heavenly axis realm, he'd need some external factors to trigger it. Nieli suddenly woke up. He heard Xiao Yu call out Nieli's name. Nieli, what's wrong? Why aren't you replying? What did you just ask? How long has it been? Nieli looked at Xiao Yu and asked. It's only been a few minutes. Why aren't you replying to me? Xiao Yu asked as she looked at Nieli. She was filled with shock and doubt. What's going on with Nieli? How did his cultivation increase so much in such a short period of time? He's probably only a step away from the heavenly axis realm. Nieli bitterly smiled. He couldn't answer Xiao Yu. Even if he did, Xiao Yu probably wouldn't understand. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, Nieli had already experienced nearly 20 years. The profoundness of the Temporal Demon Spirit book was truly unimaginable. A small remnant page was actually able to stop time for 20 years. Nieli glanced at the other 2 remnant pages of the Temporal Demon Spirit book. These 2 remnant pages might even be worth 40 years of time. However, Nieli wasn't planning on using them for the time being. He'd already reached a bottleneck. Bitter cultivation was no longer of any use to him. Only by finding an opportunity to break through to the heavenly axis realm would he be able to use the remnant pages of the Temporal Demon Spirit book. Chapter 413. The confusion of time left Nieli at a loss. Time flew by in the blink of an eye as he cultivated. However, 20 years was still a long time. It was as if he'd been dragged back to reality from a long dream. Just by sitting in meditation and cultivating, one's cultivation would progress very slowly. It would be much slower than normal cultivation, but it wouldn't make up for the long period of time. But once he'd reached this level, it was useless to just cultivate. He wasn't far from the heavenly axis realm. All he needed was an opportunity to break through. As Nieli stabilized his cultivation, he smiled at Xiao Yu and said, I just entered a mysterious state. That's why my cultivation rose so quickly. Did I disturb you? Xiao Yu asked apologetically. She'd just called out to Nieli a few times. Nieli waved his hand. Not at all. At that moment, a strand of intent was observing Nieli in the void illusionary divine palace. This kid has the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. He's like a robber. He stole everything from my void illusionary divine palace, even the void illusionary divine array. I thought the secrets of the void illusionary divine palace were already extraordinary. I never thought that this kid would have an even more shocking secret. The intent murmured, then smiled strangely. I'd like to see what you'll do after you open the void illusionary divine palace. That thought flashed by. Nieli sensed something and looked in the direction of the void illusionary divine palace. After condensing his 9 fate stars, Nya Li's perception had improved. Although he didn't know what that thing was, Nya Li was certain that it wasn't a living creature. Otherwise, it wouldn't have tried to seize his body. The intent of the void illusionary divine palace? What an interesting thing. Nya Li understood that it was difficult for him to open the palace in front of him. Therefore, Nya Li didn't even try. However, it wouldn't take long for him to open it, as long as it was within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nya Li didn't believe that that fellow could run anywhere. Although he had condensed 9 life stars, he was still a life star. But in terms of strength, it was still far from enough. After hiding in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains, painting for another 10 days, Xianming Shenzhen's men would have already returned. At that time, he could finally leave the painting. Nya Li looked around. As he flew through the space within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, he landed on one of the deity's lakes. With a wave of his right hand, he swept away all the spiritual stones within the deity's lake. After nourishing the deity's lake in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting for so long, it was finally time to harvest. Just one deity's lake had given him more than 300,000 spirit stones. There were also more than 500 spirit stone essences. After collecting all the spiritual stones and spirit stone essences, Nya Li continued towards the second deity's lake. All the spiritual stones and spirit stone essences from the 50 deities' lakes had been collected by Nya Li. After a quick calculation, he estimated that there were more than 20 million spiritual stones and 30,000 spirit stone essences. This was definitely a shocking amount of wealth. Nya Li estimated that his wealth was already comparable to half of Hagami Munmun. He had to convert these spiritual stones into strength. Otherwise, it would be too wasteful. Nya Li thought to himself. Suddenly, he recalled something and his eyes lit up. How could he have forgotten about this? 15 days later, Gu Clan's clan assembly. The Gu Clan's elders had gathered together to discuss the matter of Gu Bei destroying someone's deity's lake. In the spacious hall, the Gu Clan's patriarch, Gu Tianlong, sat at the head. On both sides of the hall sat a row of Gu Clan's elders. Gu Bei, Gu Heng, and the rest of the Gu Clan's younger generation stood in the middle of the hall. Cousin Gu Bei has indeed gone too far in this matter. I hope that patriarch and elders can uphold justice for me. Gu Heng cupped his hands and spoke with an extremely wronged expression. At the same time, the Gu Clan is also a member of the Gu Clan. Cousin Gu Bei, why are you in such a hurry to kill each other? If Cousin Gu Bei inherits the position of patriarch in the future, please treat us clan's younger generation well. Hearing Gu Heng's words, the Gu Clan's younger generation looked at each other in dismay and secretly conversed. I didn't expect Cousin Gu Heng to suffer such a huge loss. I heard that Cousin Gu Bei recently established his own power. He's developing very quickly, but I didn't expect him to defeat Cousin Gu Heng. This is really unimaginable. Cousin Gu Heng wasn't defeated. It was Gu Bei who used some tricks to destroy Cousin Gu Heng's deity's lake. Destroying someone's deity's lake is a bit too ruthless. After all, we're from the same clan. Cousin Gu Heng has always treated people kindly, but Gu Bei is being too overbearing. If Gu Bei inherits the position of patriarch, will there be any way for us clan's younger generation to survive? This person was obviously siding with Gu Heng as he spoke in a slightly loud voice. After hearing this, Gu Bei frowned and cupped his hands towards Gu Tianlong. In the outside world, there is always competition. Senior Gu Heng gathered outsiders to destroy my demon league. Am I not allowed to retaliate? After Cousin Gu Heng lost, he ran over here to weep and even gathered a few elders to impeach me. As for his intentions, I'm sure you can tell with a single glance. Gu Heng looked coldly at Gu Bei and said, "It is true that there is competition in the outside world, but Cousin Gu Bei is being too ruthless. How much hatred does he have for destroying the deity's lake?" How many deities' lakes are there under Hagami Myunmyun's control? Anyone who destroys it will weaken Hagami Myunmyun. Cousin Gubei, could it be that you were sent by the Yaoshin sect? Both of you shut up, Gu Tianlong shouted. The disciples of my Gu clan should be united. It's fine if the two of you kill your own clansmen, but you even quarreled in the clan meeting. If word of this gets out, the Gu clan will lose all its face. Gu Tianlong exuded an awe-inspiring aura. Both Gu Heng and Gu Bei didn't dare to speak. Elders, what do you think? Gu Tianlong swept his gaze over the surrounding elders. Third Elder Gu Yuntian coldly said, Since Gu Heng is my disciple, I shouldn't say anything in this kind of situation. I don't want others to say that I'm biased. However, I still have to say something. Destroying someone's deity's lake must be severely punished. If this continues, there will only be fewer and fewer deities' lakes. Elders, what do you all think? Gu Tianlong looked at the others and asked. After a moment of silence, Guya said, The cause and effect of this matter are complicated. We need to consider it carefully. Can everyone listen to me for a moment? An elder at the side stood up. It was the 8th elder, Gu Bai. The 8th elder had always sided with Gu Heng, and this time would definitely be the same. It seemed like Gu Heng was prepared. This time, Gu Bei was in deep trouble. Destroying someone's deity's lake was indeed Gu Bei's fault. If this matter was pursued, the punishment would be extremely severe. Chapter 414. Gu Bei has indeed gone too far in destroying the deity's lake. The 8th elder Gu Bai said in a low voice. Hearing Gu Bai's words, the corner of Gu Heng's mouth curled up. The 8th elder was one of the elders who supported him, but Gu Bai's words suddenly changed. There is a reason for this. I believe all the elders of the Gu clan are aware of it. We've all seen what Gu Heng has done all these years. What's right and what's wrong will naturally be decided. Although I have always been on Gu Heng's side, I can't be partial to him this time. Gu Bai's words left everyone dumbfounded. Everyone in the Gu clan knew that Gu Bai had a close relationship with Gu Heng. Gu Bai was one of the elders who had jointly impeached Gu Bei. Why did Gu Bai suddenly change sides? Hearing Gu Bai's words, Gu Heng was furious. He glared at Gu Bai. He hadn't expected Gu Bai to be so ruthless and suddenly turn the tables on him. The 3rd elder Gu Yuntian frowned. What's wrong with Gu Bai? Why did he suddenly help Gu Bei? As soon as Gu Bai's voice faded, the 9th elder Gu Feng couldn't hold back anymore. He thought that Gu Bai was really good at picking the right time. Gu Bai obviously wanted more benefits. That's why he jumped out so quickly. Gu Feng also stood up and said, I agree with Gu Bai's words. Gu Heng's actions these past few years have indeed been a little excessive, and Gu Bei's revenge was a little out of line. However, this shows the unyielding nature of our Gu clan's disciples. He is the most suitable successor to our Gu clan. Gu Feng snorted in disdain. Furthermore, the killing in the outside world is something that the entire Divine Feathers sect has approved of. Just because you suffered a small loss, you're running back here crying? What's the meaning of this? Elder Gu Feng, aren't you one of the people who jointly impeached Gu Bei? You're such a two-faced villain. Gu Heng was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Gu Bai and Gu Feng's words made him want to vomit blood. He had never expected that after so many years of painstaking effort, the relationship between him and these two elders would develop. In the end, for some unknown reason, the two elders changed sides at the same time. The 3rd elder frowned. He didn't expect Gu Bai and Gu Feng to change sides at the last minute. It seemed like Gu Heng was doomed. Even though he was Gu Heng's master, he was still a genius. Of course, they supported Gu Heng, but they also understood that Gu Heng's reputation in the clan was not good. Now that the elders who supported Gu Heng had thrown their lot in with Gu Bei, Gu Heng no longer had any hope of competing for the position of the family head. Gu Heng, how can you say that? Gu Feng's face darkened. He said coldly, I was right to impeach Gu Bei before, but that's because Gu Bei did make some mistakes. But Gu Bei's mistake pales in comparison to yours. Gu Heng was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Several elders next to him stood up. I also support the two elders, Gu Bai and Gu Feng. Me too. The elders who jointly impeached Gu Bei expressed their opinions one after another. There were a few elders that Gu Bei hadn't visited, but after seeing the situation, they immediately turned to Gu Bei's side. Looking at Gu Bei's posture, even the 8th and 9th elders had been moved. It was obvious that she was determined to get the position of the family head. At this time, they naturally knew how to judge the situation. Gu Heng was a man who was down. Originally, the relationship that Gu Heng had established with these elders was based on money. If Gu Bei offered a higher price, it would be easy to move them. Gu Tianlong, Gu Ya, and the other elders looked at each other. Those elders who supported Gu Bei didn't need to say anything. Gu Bai, Gu Feng, and the other elders were already cheering for Gu Bei. Their faces revealed gratification. It seemed that Gu Bei had done a lot of things in private to be able to make so many elders support him at the same time. This proved that Gu Bei indeed had the ability to control the family. As for the elders, who were neutral, if they could only choose between Gu Heng and Gu Bei, they would naturally choose Gu Bei. Although Gu Bei destroyed the deity's lake, at least she did it openly with Gu Heng, unlike Gu Heng. In order to fight for power, she secretly poisoned her own clansmen. Gu Lan was Gu Bei's elder sister. It was understandable that Gu Bei hated Gu Heng so much. This kind of situation caught Gu Heng by surprise. Gu Heng was in a daze. Why did it turn out like this? After so many years of hard work, he thought that the position of the Gu clan patriarch was already in his grasp. But who would have thought that it would turn out like this? Since things have come to this, then let me announce how to deal with it. Gu Tianlong said in a deep voice the internal strife between Gu Bei and Gu Heng's family, and the fact that Gu Bei destroyed the deity's lake was indeed inappropriate. However, on account of the circumstances, he will not be punished. However, in order to answer to the disciples of Hagami Mianmian, he will be punished by donating 500,000 spiritual stones to Hagami Mianmian and 1 million spiritual stones to the Gu clan. He will be ordered to pay the full amount within 3 years without any delay. As for Gu Heng, he did not repent for his mistake in the first place. Instead, he was the first to complain. He will be punished by facing the wall for 30 years. Patriarch, wait. The third elder was about to speak, but was interrupted by Gu Tianlong. I have already decided on this matter. If anyone wants to stand up for him, they will have to consider the consequences. Gu Tianlong said in a deep voice. Gu Heng's eyes were filled with confusion. He still could not understand why he had come to the step. Gu Tianlong punished Gu Bei's spiritual stones because he wanted to answer to Hagami Mianmian. On the other hand, he knew that Gu Bei was very rich. He could use this as an excuse to fill up the family's treasury. However, he did not know how much money Gu Bei had. If he knew how much money Gu Bei had, he would definitely feel that the punishment was too light. To an ordinary person, 1,500,000 spiritual stones was an extremely shocking amount of wealth. Although Gu Bei was being punished by donating spiritual stones, to Gu Bei, this was actually the lightest punishment. On the other hand, Gu Heng would have to face the wall for 30 years. A cultivator's best years of youth were spent in these 30 years. They should be training and improving their cultivation, but Gu Heng had to face the wall instead. By the time Gu Heng came out of his solitary confinement, his cultivation would probably not be able to catch up to Gu Bei and the others. Gu Heng would no longer be a threat to him. Most of the elders in the family were on his side. What else could Gu Heng use to compete with him? By the time Gu Heng came out in 30 years, the patriarch would already be Gu Bei. No matter what, this transaction was worth it. Gu Heng had gathered so many elders to impeach Gu Bei, but he didn't expect that he would go for wool and come home shorn. In the end, he had lost his own life. If all the elders had supported Gu Heng, even Gu Tianlong would not have been able to do anything to Gu Heng. However, who would have expected that all the elders would side with Gu Bei? Gu Heng had thought too highly of himself. He had thought that the relationships he had built over the years would not collapse so quickly. However, the truth was completely out of his expectations. The third elder, Gu Yu, stood up and swept an indifferent glance at Gu Bei before leaving. Gu Bei looked at third elder Gu Yu's back with a deep gaze. Chapter 415. Gu Bei knew that the biggest threat to her in the Gu clan wasn't Gu Heng, but the third elder, Gu Yu. Gu Heng was merely a chess piece that Gu Yu had pushed onto the stage. However, this chess piece was now crippled. Gu Heng was dazed. Gu Bei coldly glanced at Gu Heng, then cupped her hands towards Gu Tianlong, Gu Ya, and the rest. Very quickly, the news of the changes in the Gu clan spread. In Long Tianming's secret chamber, Long Tianming was incomparably furious when he heard the news. Gu Heng is a piece of trash. A piece of trash. A piece of trash. Long Tianming furiously roared. He was just about to give Gu Heng some spiritual stones so that Gu Heng could restrain Gu Bei's Demon League. However, now that Gu Heng was in confinement, there was no point in talking about it. It wouldn't be long before Gu Heng's forces were absorbed by the Demon League. From the Gu clan's point of view, the forces that Gu Heng had established were still a part of the Gu clan. They wouldn't easily hand them over to an outsider. The Gu clan situation was already completely out of control. As for the Dragon Seal family, Long Yuan's forces were also rising rapidly. Over at the Ashen Flames family, the Tianqing League, which had a close relationship with the Demon League, was also frantically expanding. Even Long Tianming felt a great sense of threat from it. The rise of these three forces all pointed to a single person, Nie Li. As long as Nie Li was alive, Long Tianming couldn't eat or sleep in peace. Nie Li had always been hiding behind the scenes, but this made Long Tianming feel an even greater threat. Now that the chess piece Gu Heng had been crippled, he could only do it himself. Long Tianming narrowed his eyes as an ominous glint flashed through his eyes. Nie Li had surprised him. Nie Li was indeed capable. However, so what? Long Tianming would make Nie Li understand that the structure of Hagami Mianmian wasn't something that could be changed by Nie Li alone. Not long after Nie Li hid underground, he saw the majestic, void, illusionary divine palace outside. Like an illusion, it disappeared without a trace. Those gathered around the void, illusionary divine palace also helplessly dispersed. With a thought, Nie Li exited the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. He abruptly leapt out of the soil and stored the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting into his soul realm. Since Xiaoyu was still in the middle of her cultivation, Nie Li decided to let Xiaoyu stay in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. He stretched his body a little. He was already at the peak of the heavenly star realm. He was only a step away from the heavenly axis realm. It felt pretty good. Nie Li flew in the direction of Hagami Mianmian. Hagami Mianmian. Nie Li, you're finally back. Lu Piao excitedly pounded Nie Li's chest when she saw Nie Li. Although Nie Li's fate soul was still in the soul hall, Lu Piao couldn't help but worry for Nie Li. Nie Li smiled and said, I was delayed outside for a while. He didn't say anything else. It was a long story to explain what happened outside. Gu Bei seemed to be in a pretty good mood. She chuckled. While you were gone, Gu Heng was sentenced to 30 years of confinement. I've already taken over his forces. Nie Li's brows twitched. He'd been mentally prepared, but he never imagined that Gu Bei would be so capable. She'd actually managed to push Gu Heng down so quickly. Speaking of which, it's Gu Heng who's not clean. He's actually trying to bite me in this situation. Not to mention that all the elders he befriended are fence-sitters. Gu Bei smiled. Yeah, this day will come for Gu Heng sooner or later. It's within my expectations. Nie Li nodded. Gu Bei suddenly thought of something and said, I heard that Long Tianming obtained quite a few treasures, gold spiritual stone essences, and the like when he was training outside. They're worth 5 to 6 million spiritual stones, and he's currently expanding his forces. I'm guessing that we're threatening him." Nieli furrowed his brows at Gu Bei's words. This was truly a strange matter. Long Tianming must have been training in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Long Tianming was being led to the side chamber. He shouldn't have gotten anything. Even if he did, Xianming Shenzhen and the Son of Fire had sealed the entire Void Illusionary Divine Palace. Even if Long Tianming managed to return, all his treasures would have been taken away. It didn't make sense for him to return with treasures worth 5 to 6 million spiritual stones. There must be something fishy going on. In his previous life, Niali had always felt that there was something wrong with Long Tianming. The entire Hagami Munyan had fallen apart, but Long Tianming had been the only one to benefit from it. From this, one could see how scheming he was. Furthermore, it was impossible for Long Tianming to do such a thing by himself. Could it be that Long Tianming was colluding with the Yaoshan sect? If that was the case, it would explain why Long Tianming was able to leave the Void Illusionary Divine Palace safely and obtain so many treasures. Gu Bei knitted her brows. If Long Tianming has that many spiritual stones, then I'm afraid that we won't be able to compete with him in terms of financial resources. He's been recruiting experts on a large scale recently. Lu Piao curled her lips. I don't believe that we can't deal with Long Tianming with an alliance of 3 major forces. Long Tianming was only rich. Gu Bei shook her head. You're wrong. Long Tianming has been operating for so many years. I'm afraid that the forces he controls are much stronger than our Demon League and Tianqing League combined. Nia Li calmly said, You don't have to worry about money. I'll give you 10 million spiritual stones. You can just compete with Long Tianming. If that's not enough, I still have more. 10 million spiritual stones? Lu Piao blankly looked at Nieli. During this period of time, she finally understood what 10 million spiritual stones meant. That was a huge amount of wealth. Just where did Nieli get so many spiritual stones? At this moment, Gu Bei was also dumbfounded. She knew that Nieli had a lot of spiritual stones, but she never imagined that he would have so many. 10 million spiritual stones was nothing to Nieli. With 10 million spiritual stones, why would he be afraid of Long Tianming? If Long Tianming wanted to compete with him, then he'd just have to compete with him to see who could offer a higher price. I'll leave the Demon League to you guys. Nie Li looked at Gu Bei and Lu Piao. He had to make the most of his time to cultivate. Furthermore, he had to investigate Long Tianming's background. If he wanted to kill Long Tianming, he might not be able to confront him head-on. If he could get some information on Long Tianming, then things would be much easier. Don't worry. We have so many spiritual stones. If we can't do it well, then we might as well kill ourselves. Gu Bei confidently said. After such a long period of experience, he had already understood many things. He was also becoming more and more like a leader. Hearing Gu Bei's words, Nieli smiled and nodded his head. He vaguely saw the Gu Bei from his previous life. One person, one sword, one man, one man, one man, one man. In this life, with his help, Gu Bei would definitely be able to reach even greater heights. Chapter 416. At the exit of the Void Illusionary Divine Palace, a group of people were being interrogated by the experts of the Yaoshan sect. From time to time, a few human experts would get into conflict with the Yaoshan sect and get killed. Xianming Shenzhen had suffered setbacks in the Void Illusionary Divine Palace, which made him even more enraged. His subordinates had become even more unbridled. They'd kill anyone they disliked. In any case, they had Xianming Shenzhen's support. What did they have to be afraid of? Nie Li looked at Xianming Shenzhen, who was hovering in the sky. With such a martial ancestor realm expert present, it wouldn't be easy for him to escape, even with Yan Yang's help. What should he do? Nia Li's mind quickly turned. Yan Yang transmitted his voice to Nia Li. This Xianming Shenzhen is a very difficult person to deal with. However, there are still some people he's afraid of. I'm the holy son of the Skyblaze sect, so he won't casually make a move against me. However, it's hard to say for others, especially since you're only at the heavenly fate realm. It'll be very dangerous for you to follow me. He won't casually make a move against me, but he might kill the people around me to establish his might. The conflict between the Skyblaze sect and the Yaoshan sect had been going on for a long time. However, that was a conflict between sections. In private, martial ancestor realm experts wouldn't rashly start a war. After all, once they reached the martial ancestor realm, their goal was to advance a step further. Wasting their divine soul for no reason was an unwise move. Unless it was a conflict of interest between sects, they would normally be afraid of each other. Killing the Skyblaze sect's holy son might cause the Skyblaze sect's martial ancestor realm experts to make a move against Xianming Shenzhen. Xianming Shenzhen didn't want that to happen. However, if it was just the people around Yanyang, then Xianming Shenzhen wouldn't have to worry about anything. Senior brother Yanyang, instead of waiting here, why don't we take a gamble? If I go alone, it'll be even more dangerous. The Yaoshan sect will definitely kill me. If I follow behind you, there is still a chance. Nia Li said. He could only hope that Xianming Shenzhen did not notice them. Yan Yang pondered for a moment, then nodded. That was true. It was impossible for Nia Li to leave the void illusionary divine palace by himself. We have to hurry. If we wait for the Son of Fire to come out, we'll have to leave as soon as possible. That would be troublesome. Yan Yang thought for a moment and reminded him. Son of Fire was the disciple of Xianming Shenzhen. The two flew out of the void illusionary divine palace. A heavenly axis, realm 9-stage expert from the Yaoshan sect extended his hand towards Yan Yang. You too, stop. Yan Yang coldly snorted and a powerful energy enveloped his body. Bang! The energy of that 9-stage heavenly axis realm expert was rebounded. He looked at Yan Yang in astonishment. After all, Yan Yang was only at the heavenly axis realm, but his strength had already far surpassed his own. Yan Yang waved his right hand and tossed the items in his hand to the Yaoshan sect expert. This is all we have. The Yaoshan sect expert furrowed his brows. If they fought again, he definitely wouldn't be Yan Yang's opponent. If that happened, he'd definitely suffer a loss. That would be very shameful. He coldly snorted and swept his gaze across Yan Yang and Nia Li. Yan Yang and Nia Li didn't have anything on them. He glanced at Yan Yang's interspatial ring. The Yaoshan sect expert's eyes lit up. The Yaoshan sect expert waved his hand and said, At least you're sensible. Scram! Yan Yang and Nia Li hurriedly walked past with their heads lowered. They could feel a powerful intent sweeping across their bodies. Nia Li felt a suffocating pressure. Xianming Shenzhen was examining them. A brief moment later, the powerful intent retracted. Yan Yang had nothing on him. Xianming Shenzhen definitely wouldn't be able to sense the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting in Nia Li's soul realm. Aside from that, Yan Yang had nothing on him. Xianming Shenzhen probably couldn't be bothered to make a move against a heavenly fate realm like Nia Li. Xianming Shenzhen swept his gaze across Nia Li and Yan Yang, then retracted his gaze. Since he didn't want to kill Yan Yang, he'd just pretend that he didn't see anything. Wuyazi watched Nia Li and Yan Yang leave safely from afar. He furrowed his brows, feeling a little puzzled. Could it be that Nia Li and Yan Yang had obediently handed over the treasures? That didn't make sense. Nia Li definitely wouldn't be so obedient. There was definitely something fishy going on here. Wuyazi pondered for a brief moment. After some thought, he retracted his gaze. It didn't matter if Nia Li had taken the treasures or not. He couldn't do anything to Nia Li. if Xianming Shenzhen or the Son of Fire found out about the demon blood sacrifice. He'd definitely die a tragic death. After Nieli and Yang left the void illusionary divine palace, they flew away. An hour later, the Son of Fire flew out of the void illusionary divine palace. Master! The Son of Fire bowed towards Xianming Shenzhen. Xianming Shenzhen nodded slightly and asked, Disciple, did you find anything in the void illusionary divine palace? Master! The void illusionary divine palace's mechanisms are extremely complicated. I didn't find anything, the Son of Fire said gloomily. He didn't dare to tell his master that Nieli had tricked him. It'd be extremely embarrassing. Xianming Shenzhen's expression turned a little unsightly. I broke the void illusionary divine palace's barrier. But why didn't I find anything? Master, how many people did you see? The Son of Fire asked. How many people? Who? Xianming Shenzhen furrowed his brows. Wuyazi Yanyan and 2 strangers, the Son of Fire said. Wuyazi's in the void illusionary divine palace. As for Yanyan, he's already left. Xianming Shenzhen said he's the holy son of the Skyblaze sect, the disciple of that old fart. I don't want to fall out with that old fart for now. Previously, Xianming Shenzhen's strength was slightly inferior to Yan Yang's master, not to mention that his intent had been burned away by the black flames. That's why he'd let Yan Yang leave. The Son of Fire hastily said, Master, they might have already taken the treasures out of the void illusionary divine palace. That's impossible. How could the 2 of them take the treasures away under my watch? Xianming Shenzhen shook his head. He'd already used his intent to search for Nieli and Yang. However, he hadn't found anything that Nieli and Yang had taken. Although I don't know what's going on, I'm certain that there's something wrong with Yang. The Son of Fire said anxiously. Xianming Shenzhen furrowed his brows at the Son of Fire's words. His right hand moved, and he threw a ring to the Son of Fire. This is Yan Yang's interspatial ring. Take a look. The Son of Fire swept a glance at it and said, Although there are some decent items inside, Yan Yang must have hidden a portion of them. Master, hurry up and stop him. Don't let him escape. Chapter 417. Nieli looked at Gu Bei and Lu Piao and said, I'm going to bring you guys to a place, but you guys have to keep it a secret. Not a single word can leak. A place? What place? Gu Bei was stunned for a moment before asking. Lu Piao smiled. Don't worry, we definitely won't leak anything. Don't you trust us? Nieli waved his right hand, and the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting flew out. A powerful energy enveloped Gu Bei and Lu Piao. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Gu Bei and Lu Piao turned into 2 streaks of light and entered the painting. When Gu Bei and Lu Piao entered the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, they were instantly dumbfounded. They couldn't imagine such a spectacular scene. Deities' lakes floated in the sky, densely packed together like a huge divine array. There were even some buildings. The density of heavenly energy here was dozens or even hundreds of times that of the outside world. Boundless heavenly energy filled the entire space within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. So the deity roots that Nieli seized were all moved here to form the deity's lakes. Gu Bei suddenly realized, this is the space within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. It's so huge. It's like a miniature world. Lu Piao exclaimed in shock. Although she knew that the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting was in Nieli's hands, she didn't expect it to be such an incredible treasure. Nieli returned to his courtyard and hid the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. With a thought, he entered the space within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Inside the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nieli, you're here? Gu Bei flew over when she saw Nieli. Nieli, roughly how many spiritual stones can the deity's lake produce in a day? Lu Piao couldn't help asking. At least a few 100,000 or even 1,000,000 a day. I'm not sure either. Nieli pondered for a moment and said, the heavenly energy within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting is much denser than the outside world. Therefore, the number of spiritual stones produced is much higher. Hearing Nieli's words, Lu Piao and Gu Bei were shocked. Hundreds of thousands, or even millions of yuan a day. This was simply too shocking. The amount of spiritual stones produced by Nie Li's myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting in a single day was equivalent to the accumulated wealth of an elder for decades. In a year's time, Nie Li's wealth would probably be comparable to the entire Hagami Minmian. So that's how it is. Since that's the case, won't we be able to get more deities' roots in the future? Gu Bei couldn't help getting excited. Nieli, since you have so many spiritual stones, have you ever thought of recruiting some experts from the Sky Origin Divine Clan? Gu Bei couldn't help asking. Hearing Gu Bei's words, Nie Li's heart jolted. Nie Li couldn't help pondering. This was a pretty good suggestion. What's the Sky Origin Divine Clan? Lu Piao couldn't help asking in astonishment. Gu Bei explained, the Sky Origin Divine Clan is a clan that lives in the endless wilderness. Because their bloodline is too powerful, they were sealed in the endless wilderness by the people of the ancestral, demonic Saint Land. If the experts of the Sky Origin Divine Clan want to leave the endless wilderness, they have to sign a master-servant contract with someone. The Sky Origin Divine Clan has to devour large amounts of spiritual stones every day. However, the endless wilderness is lacking in resources. Many experts of the Sky Origin Divine Clan would go to the borders of the endless wilderness to find contractors to survive. However, their asking price is very high, at least 50 to 60,000 spiritual stones per person. However, the experts of the Sky Origin Divine Clan are at least at the Tao of Dragon Realm. After listening to Gu Bei's words, Lu Piao's eyes lit up. Didn't that mean that as long as they had money, they could hire a large number of Tao of Dragon Realm experts? Once we're done here, let's make a trip to the border town of the endless wilderness. Said Nieli. Indeed, if they had the help of some Tao of Dragon Realm experts, the Demon League strength would definitely be greatly enhanced. What are we going to do next? Gu Bei and Lu Piao couldn't help asking. They still didn't know why Nie Li had asked them to come here. Next, I'll lay down a Heavenly Dragon 9-blaze secret technique array. It can stimulate the demon spirits in your bodies to advance together. However, you have to listen to my instructions. Said Nieli. Okay, replied Gu Bei and Lu Piao. Nie Li took out the Thunder God's meteorite sword and lightly cut his wrist. Blood flowed into a bowl. Nie Li handed 2 bowls of blood to Gu Bei and Lu Piao. Drink this first. I've recently obtained the power of the demon blood sacrifice. This blood contains the power of the primordial bloodline. Gu Bei and Lu Piao picked it up and drank it. They immediately felt a scorching heat flow. It flowed down their throats. The power contained in the blood nearly caused their bodies to explode. Nie Li started laying down the Heavenly Dragon 9-blaze secret technique array. Millions of spiritual stones filled the sky, forming a mysterious array. Boom, 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 boom. Boundless energy surged violently. Dragon-shaped shadows continuously circled the sky, enveloping Nieli and the other 2. The intent in the void illusionary divine palace was shocked by the scene. Even with his tens of thousands of years of experience, he couldn't tell what kind of array Nieli was using. Although he couldn't understand it, he knew that this array was incomparably powerful. Using this array was incomparably dangerous. The slightest mistake could cause the 3 people in the center of the array to explode and die. However, Nieli still dared to use it. It was obvious that Nia Li's control over this array had already reached an extremely exquisite level. In just a short year, he'd gone from an ordinary person to a heavenly star realm, and was about to break through to the heavenly axis realm. If anyone knew about this speed, their eyes would probably fall out of their sockets. Even among the peerless geniuses of the draconic ruins realm over the past tens of thousands of years, none of them could be compared to Nia Li. Nia Li could feel the blood-winged Saint Dragon, Fang Panda, and Shadow Devil within his body becoming restless. Their strength was rapidly increasing. Nia Li's cultivation was only at the heavenly star realm, but the strength of these 3 demon spirits had climbed all the way to the 6th-stage heavenly axis realm, especially the blood-winged Saint Dragon, a god-level growth rate demon spirit. Although it was only at the 6th-stage heavenly axis realm, it wasn't any weaker than a 9th-stage heavenly axis realm. At this moment, in Li Xingyun's courtyard, servant rushed over and reported. Reporting to young master, we don't know where young masters Gu Bei and Lu Piao went. We don't have any news of them. Li Xingyun slightly knitted his brows. He had just returned from outside. After pondering for a while, he said, Li Hu, you stay here. When Gu Bei and Lu Piao return, immediately inform them. Yes. Li Hu nodded his head. A trace of worry was revealed between his brows. It just so happened that at such an important time, the 2 young masters, Gu Bei and Lu Piao, weren't here. He couldn't help worrying for Li Xingyun. Chapter 4:18. Within the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains, painting Lu Piao and Gu Bei were still shocked by the might of the heavenly Dragon 9 Blaze secret technique array. Fire dragons roared towards the sky as they continuously bombarded their soul realms. Nia Li had used the power of the demon blood sacrifice and millions of spiritual stones to lay down the heavenly Dragon 9 Blaze secret technique array. His goal was to break open Lu Piao and Gu Bei's soul realms. Time quickly passed, and 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. In the boundless outside world under the escort of her guards, Li Xingyun turned into a streak of light as she flew. A group of people chased after her from afar. The one leading them was the first-in-line successor of the Ashen Flames family, Li Yufeng. At this moment, Li Xingyun looked to be in a sorry state. His right arm had been chopped off, and he'd only received a simple bandage. There were also a few cracks on his battle armor. He didn't know what kind of artifact Li Xingyun had in his hands to be able to shatter his battle armor. Li Xingyun felt extremely sullen. The forces that Li Yufeng controlled were clearly far from his own. But this time, Li Yufeng suddenly had several hundred Heavenly Axis realm experts under him, which caught Li Xingyun unprepared. The Tianqing League's forces had suffered a heavy blow. The 2 deities' lakes that they'd just snatched had fallen into Li Yufeng's hands. Li Xingyun was extremely depressed. Young master, there's something fishy about them suddenly having so many experts, said a follower beside him. It's indeed fishy. When I fought with Gu Heng also suddenly had several hundred Heavenly Axis realm experts under him. Among the younger generation of the Hagami Mianmian, there are only 2 people with that kind of ability. One is Situ Beiyan, and the other is Long Tianming. Li Xingyun muttered as he ran. Young master, who do you think is more likely? Long Tianming might be arrogant, but he doesn't have a good relationship with Gu Heng and Li Yufeng. They often have conflicts. I don't think Long Tianming will help Gu Heng and Li Yufeng. As for Situ Beiyan, there's no reason for him to attack us. Li Xingyun frowned. Li Xingyun couldn't figure out who was helping Gu Heng and Li Yufeng in the dark. Long Tianming and Situ Beiyan were still the main suspects. It was just that Li Xingyun didn't have any solid evidence yet. Li Xingyun's men had already been chased to the point where there were only slightly more than 30 men left. Li Yufeng and his men were getting closer and closer. Li Yufeng's cold laughter came from afar. Li Xingyun, is that all you've got? Do you only know how to run around like a rat? You want to become the patriarch of the Ashen Flames family? A cold light flashed through Li Xingyun's eyes. He had indeed fallen into Li Yufeng's hands over the past few days. The Tianqing League had been beaten into a mess, leaving only them. However, it was still too early for Li Yufeng to be arrogant. It was just one defeat. Li Xingyun understood that he wasn't valued in the family and was pushed aside. Even the family's only dragon bloodline god, level growth, rate demon spirit, had been taken by someone through shady means. However, Li Xingyun had never given up, nor would he ever give up. One day he would take back what he wanted, even if the Ashen Flames family couldn't tolerate him in the end. He would rely on his own strength to fight for his own piece of heaven and earth. Thinking about the faces of the elders in the family, Li Xingyun's heart was bitterly disappointed. He could lose, but he wouldn't give up. They're catching up. Young master, you go first. We'll go intercept them. Whoosh! Whoosh! Dozens of followers turned around and pounced towards Li Yufeng's group. Humph, a bunch of ignorant ants. I'll let you know that following Li Xingyun is the biggest mistake of your life. A huge halberd suddenly appeared in Li Yufeng's hand. He chopped down. Boom! A follower was directly chopped into two by the unparalleled power. Earlier, Li Xingyun's right arm was chopped off by Li Yufeng's weapon. The huge halberd in Li Yufeng's hand was at least a grade 7 or even grade 8 artifact. Li Yufeng seemed to have gone mad. He killed 5 to 6 people in a row, their blood splattering all over his body. Li Xingyun's eyes turned bloodshot when he saw his loyal brothers being slaughtered by Li Yufeng. This time he had indeed underestimated his enemy, causing his brothers to suffer heavy losses. He looked into the distance. Looking into the distance, he saw the Heavenly Axis realm experts under Li Yufeng had already surrounded them. Li Xingyun stopped in his tracks. Young master, we're useless. Seeing this scene, Li Xingyun's followers couldn't help having grief and indignation on their faces. Li Xingyun brightly smiled and said, "It's not that you guys are useless. This time it's my fault. I never thought that Li Yufeng would find so many helpers. But at worst, we'll just die. 10 days from now, we'll come out and have a showdown with them." Yes, his followers were also in high spirits. Everyone, give it your all. Killing 1 is worth it. Killing 2 is worth it, Li Xingyun said as he took the lead and charged towards Li Yufeng's group. An intense battle broke out. Relying on the battle armor on his body, Li Xingyun took the lead and killed several of Li Yufeng's Heavenly Axis realm experts. Humph, you're courting death. Li Yufeng's eyes flashed with a chilling light. He originally wanted to take Li Xingyun's battle armor, but Li Xingyun had gone mad. It was too difficult to take the battle armor off Li Xingyun's body. Since he couldn't take it, then he'd just destroy it. Li Yufeng brandished his halberd and a violent energy slashed towards Li Xingyun. Asterisk boom. Asterisk Li Xingyun's other arm was also chopped off by Li Yufeng. An ominous light flashed in Li Yufeng's eyes. He was obviously stronger than Li Xingyun, but the descendants of the Ashen Flames family all liked to follow Li Xingyun. On the contrary, he had become an outsider. Even his closest brothers had betrayed him and sided with Li Xingyun. This caused Li Yufeng to hate Li Xingyun to the extreme. He viewed her as a thorn in his flesh and wished that he could tear Li Xingyun into pieces. The hatred between the two of them had been accumulated for a long time. Although 2 of his arms were chopped off, Li Xingyun still managed to kill a Heavenly Axis realm follower beside Li Yufeng with a kick. Li Yufeng, there will be a day when I take back what you've taken from me. So what if there's someone protecting you? With your strength, do you think that you can control the Ashen Flames family? Everything that you have was obtained through dishonorable means. Which descendant of the Ashen Flames family would submit to you? Li Xingyun calmly looked at Li Yufeng as a cold aura emitted from his body. You've lost to me, yet you still dare to spout such arrogant words. No matter what methods I use, everything is mine. From today onwards, if you dare to take a step out of the Hagami Munmian, I will completely annihilate you. Li Yufeng brandished his halberd and chopped it down towards Li Xingyun with incomparable rage. Boom! As the halberd chopped down, the violent energy engulfed Li Xingyun.